especially as we start getting ready for next week. Again, I'll talk more about that as we get through this week. But guys, please remember there's two worlds. There's pre-licensing world, and then there's the real world. And I know it's really easy to try to attach pre-licensing world to your personal experiences, but it's been my experience of teaching pre-licensing that your personal experience doesn't help you get through this test. What helps you get through this test is pre-licensing world. Is everybody with me? So your personal experience absolutely is valuable. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not going to tell you if your agent was right or wrong. That's not my job. But I do need you guys to disassociate yourself and focus on this. This in the syllabus is not going to get you through, is going to get you through this test. It's not going to be when you bought a house or when you had a coworker that bought a house. Does that make sense to everybody? So disassociate that. There's pre-licensing world, and then there's the real world. And if I can help you guys get through this exam, or these exams, I should say, we're going to be in pre-licensing world. So all that being said, y'all ready to just jump right in? Remember, we got to back up. We skipped the Unit 4 math last week. So we need to start there today. So you guys get your not so smart calculators, your calculators with as few as buttons on them as you can. And I want you guys to tell me in a chat, everybody in the chat, I gave you a number last week and I asked you to memorize it. We said we would talk about what that number means. So in the chat, you're telling me what that number is. We're memorizing a number this weekend. In the chat, you're telling me what that number is, so I can tell you what that number means and why it's important to you. I'm hearing from everybody. And I appreciate those of you telling me you don't remember. I appreciate that. I like honesty. So the number, thank you. The number that we're going to focus on, we're going to spend a little bit of time on, is 43,560. And why this number is important, why we need to know this number. Because when we talk about measurements, which is where we're heading with the math in Unit 4, when we're talking about measuring land, when we're talking about measuring a lot, we need to know that for every acre, 1 acre shakes out to 43,560 square feet. So this number is important. Good morning. When we are introducing you to this math that converts square feet to acres, acres to square feet. Every single acre has 43,560 square feet in it. Guys, this not is only important for the math portion of your exams. This is also a very real number that we use in the real world. As I just said, separate pre-licensing from the real world. But seriously, I do data entry for my firm, my real estate firm, and we do a lot of new construction, and I get lot dimensions, and I know the square footage. Buyers, some care about the square footage, but the buyers speak, they understand acres. So to be able to convert that square footage, those lot dimensions to an acre, I use this number almost daily. When you're working with buyers, you may be out in the backyard and the buyer may say, I wonder how many acres this is. And by the time I'm done with you guys, you'll be able to tell your buyer, you'll be able to whip your calculator out and tell your buyer how many acres this is. Do you have an impressed buyer when you can answer that question for them? You better believe you do. So where we're starting, how we're going to start understanding and learning this number. By the way, put this number on a flashcard. You need to memorize it. They're not going to give this to you on your test. There's lots of tricks to memorize this number. I think my personal favorite is 4 little old ladies going 35 and a 60. Have we been behind them before? 4 little old ladies going 35 and a 60. Again, I don't care how you memorize it, just memorize this number. So what we're doing, as I said, is we're learning how to convert from acres to square feet or square feet to acres. And there's a couple different methods that we can use to try this. If the problem gives you acres and asks you for the square feet, then we're going to multiply. If the problem gives you square feet and asks you for acres, then we're going to divide. Where are my newfound T-bar fans? Do I have anybody? Oh, if I don't have you yet, this may get you. I have figured a way to use this with the T-bar. So you have 2 choices. You can either know that you multiply when you're going from acres to square feet, or you can divide when you're going square feet to acres, or we can use a T-bar. If we tweak it just a bit, just a hair, and instead of using the rate or percent in the bottom right, because I don't have a rate or percent to use. So instead of using that, we're going to use that magic number, 43,560. I'm going to have square feet on top, and then acres is going to go in the bottom left. You have choices. 1, both, either, makes no difference to me. Whichever one you choose, both of them, whatever, needs to go on a flashcard. Please always remember, all math always goes on a flashcard. Everybody have one or other of the both written down? So now I'm going to ask you guys some questions. Everybody good? I would like you guys to tell me in a private chat how many acres are in 21,780 square feet. How many acres? You got 30 more seconds. So one thing I try to do with the math is to get you guys thinking about numbers before you ever pick up a calculator. You might be able to eliminate an answer choice if we just think it. So let me ask you guys some questions. We know that there is 21,780 square feet in this problem. The problem wants to know how many acres. Show me. More than being thumbs up, less than being thumbs down. Is 21,780 more than or less than 43,560? 21,780 more than or less than? And I'm seeing a bunch of thumbs downs. So is 21,780 more than 1 acre, or is it less than 1 acre? It is less than, because we know 1 acre is 43,560. Everybody with me? So if you had A, B, C, and D, and you had an answer choice that was more than 1 acre, Can't you go ahead and immediately eliminate that one? And you've never even picked a calculator up and you just gave yourself a better chance of getting it right. Everybody with me? So look, when we talk about read the problem first, yeah, you can sit there and read it and then go back and say, I don't know what I just read. When I say read it, I mean like read it, like look at it and study it and ask yourself, what does this mean? What is this asking me? So I think we're all in agreement that our answer is going to be less than 43,000. I'm sorry, less than 1 acre. Yes, because we're dealing with less than 43,560. My non-T-bar fans, on your calculator, you take 21,780, divide it by 43,560. My T-bar fans, tweaking it just a hair, just a teeny tiny bit. Instead of using that rate or percent, we're going to use our magic number, 43,560. Again, I divide 21,780 divided by 43,560. How much is this? Half an acre. Questions on that? Okay. Well, that was fun. Let's do another one. Tell me in a chat, how many square feet are in 4 acres? Got 30 more seconds. So first we read the problem. Problem wants to know how many square feet in 4 acres? Is 4 acres more than or less than 43,560? 4 acres is more than. Why? Because 1 acre equals 43,560. See what we're doing here? 1 acre is 43,560. So now in this case, we're going to take 4 acres and we're going to multiply 4 by our magic number, 43,560. Again, my T-bar fans, we make just a little tweak. 43,560 goes here, acres goes in the bottom left. What I'm solving for is X, up down line on the T-bar means multiply. Again, they're going to give you or expect you to find square feet. I'll show you in just a second how you can find square feet. They're going to want you to convert it to acres, or they're going to give you acres and want you to convert it to square feet. I don't know what you're going to see on your test. What I do know, you're not going to see 43,560. So not only do we need to know that number, but we need to know how to be able to convert square feet to acres. We're either multiplying or dividing. Questions? Another calculation in measuring has to deal with finding the square foot. Now, in this class, we're going to teach you how to measure a couple shapes. I'll give you examples. Good news is we're not getting crazy. We're going to learn how to measure squares and rectangles. We're going to learn how to measure triangles, and I'll talk about that in just a second. We're not getting into any other shape. So there's the good news. First off, let's start with our square foot of a square or rectangle. And there's a couple different ways this can be looked at. The first way this could be looked at is if we're measuring room dimensions, like if we want to know the square feet of a kitchen or a dining room or the bedrooms. The other way we could look at this is if we want to know the square footage of a lot, a parcel of property. So they may give you the length and the width of the lot. You find the square feet, and then you got to convert that square feet to acres. These generally are multi-step problems. So to find square feet of a square or a rectangle, we're going to take length times width. Again, this is generally the first or the number that we use when we're measuring a room. We're going to talk about measuring homes, properties. We're going to talk about measuring rooms, all that good stuff, what counts, what doesn't, all that when we get to Unit 8. So hold off on measuring questions for the time being. We'll get to it. Right now, we're just trying to determine the square foot of a rectangle or a square. So again, if you're looking at a kitchen, you might be looking at length times width. If you're standing on a piece of property, you're looking at length times width. Properties sometimes use different verbiage. We're still saying the same thing. We're just calling it something different. So if you're looking at a lot, for example, the problem may give you something like called front foot times depth. Still going to give you square foot. The length or the front foot is always the first number given. The length or the front foot is always the first number given. And when you're looking at a lot, at a piece of land, this is our property. Here's the road. Road. The front foot is the part of the land, part of the lot that runs parallel with the road. So the front foot of the lot is the length of the lot. It's the first dimension given, and it's what runs parallel with the road. If we were to stand at this lot with our back to the road, we would be looking at the depth of the property. The depth answers the question, how deep is it? How far back does it go? So length times width, again, it's all about just different vocabulary, different verbiage. Length times width, generally speaking, is going to be used for kitchens, measuring rooms. Front foot and depth may be often used for measuring lots, lands, that kind of thing. All the same formula, all saying the same thing. You may see, for example, you might get your hands on a plat map, and you may see that the lot dimensions of the plat map, let's say this one is, I'm just making numbers up, 225. This one is 150. There's my formula right there, right? 225 by 150. And if we were to multiply that, we would get the square foot of this piece of land. So length times width equals square foot. Front foot times depth equals square foot as well. T-bar fans, guess what? I can make a little tweak, just a little bit, to the T-bar. We can also use our square foot formula. Square feet goes on top, length goes on the bottom left, width goes on the bottom right. Again, just a teeny tiny tweak to the T-bar. And I'll tell you where this T-bar comes handy, where this thing becomes helpful. If they ask you, they give you the length and the width, they ask you for the square feet, we got it. We know we need to multiply. But what if they give you the square foot and the length, but they ask you for the width? Now I got to divide something. So the T-bar helps me know what it is I have to divide. So in this case, when we're solving for the width, the back fourth line in the T-bar means divide. So we would take the square feet divided by the length. and that would give us the width. Let's go squealing back in time for a second. I'm going to give some of you guys some nightmares. Y'all remember pre-algebra? Woo, that was a long time ago, wasn't it? The basis of pre-algebra says what? A times B equals C. And that's exactly what we're looking at with this formula. A times B equals C. Questions on squares and rectangles, how we can measure squares and rectangles. The other shape we need to know how to measure is a triangle. We'll talk about in a minute why we need to know how to measure triangle. Can I get everybody, as you guys are writing, can I get everybody to agree that a triangle is half of a square? Does everybody see that? You take a square and you lop it in two, what you looking at? You're looking at a right triangle. We're not getting into obtuse triangles or all that other mess. So how you find a triangle, length times width, cut it in half, divide it by 2. Again, I'll show you in just 1 second where and why we're going to use a triangle shape. So triangles, length times width, divide it by 2. They're not going to give you the square footage and ask you to find the length or the width on these. That's math beyond our scope. So with triangles, we need to know length times width divided by 2. Put these formulas on a flashcard or on your piece of paper that says formulas. We have this? All right, private chat time. I want you guys to all tell me in a private chat what's the front foot, the square feet, and the acres. The front feet, square feet, and acres. Private chat, please. I hear from everyone. Do about 30 more seconds or so. Okay. So first, the question wants us to find the front foot. Front foot, all front foot is the piece of the land that runs parallel to the road. So how many front feet are on this lot? 150. There are 150 front feet. Next, it wants us to find square feet. To find square feet, we take the length, the length times the width. It's going to give us square feet. So we already decided the length or the front foot is 150 feet. The width or the depth of this lot is how deep it goes. Again, if we were standing right here, my back to the road, when we talk about depth or width, we're saying how deep does it go? How far back away from the road does it go? So we know the length or the front foot is 150. My width or my depth is 50. So length times width tells me we have 7,500 square feet. 7,500 square feet. Stop. Is 7,500 more than or less than 43,560? It is less than. So I'd have more than an acre or less than an acre? Less than an acre. Just think about these numbers, I guess is my point, when I'm trying to think about the numbers. So now that we know it's less than, it's something I know I can work with. If we want to divide or if we want to do the T-bar, makes no difference. Now that we know our square foot, we take our square footage, divide it by 43,560, and we get 0.17 acres. 150 front feet, 7,500 square feet, 0.17 acres. I think I have, there you go. I mentioned a problem last week. I said, skip it for now. We'll come back to it. I do want to address it because some of you past candidates have called me like about ready to bang their head on the table trying to figure it out. So let's go back real quick to page 68. I don't know why it's in unit 3 and not in unit 4, but it is. So let's go back to page 68. And on page 68, when we look at number 21, and I'll let you guys read this problem. I'm not going to do this problem for you. But what I would do want to point out, there's a piece when you're looking at the answer, this problem, once it finds the square footage, the road footage, excuse me, once it finds the road footage or the front footage, it then divides it by 2. And you guys have driven yourselves nuts, understandably, trying to figure out why they divide this by 2. And the reason being is because they're doing a street assessment, which means they're paving this street. Doesn't somebody live or own the property across the street? So once we find what the assessment is for this portion of the street, then we need to divide it by 2 so you can share it with your across the street neighbor. You guys seen this one yet? Anybody figure it out? Few of you? Good. So the reason, again, page 68, number 21, when you get to the answer, the reason they divide it by 2 is because you're sharing with your neighbor across the street. Questions? Another formula you may see is that for square yards. Square yards is used when you're measuring for like flooring. So if you were to go to Lowe's and buy carpet or tile or laminate or wood, they would help you determine how much flooring you need to purchase based on the square yards. Formula for square yards, length times width, divided by 9. Also discussed in Unit 4, and I hesitate to call it math because it's more just understanding the verbiage. It's more understanding people when they speak. And you guys very well may have heard this. Have you guys ever heard of anybody referring to lots or land or properties as cost per square foot or cost per acre? We're kind of looking at a formula here, although again, it's more about understanding the verbiage. We do need to pick the calculator up, but it is about understanding the verbiage. If we want to know what each square foot in this home costs, we take the total cost of the property, divide it by the number of square feet, and what we're left with is cost per square foot. Sometimes in math, including this time, when you see the word per, it means divide. So here's your formula right here. Let's say, and I'm going to make numbers up as I go. Let's say this property, the cost of the property is $350,000 and it is 2,200 square feet. Saying cost per square foot is the same thing as saying 350,000 divided by 2,200. So if we want to know what every single square foot in this property costs, we take 350,000 divided by 2,200, and I'm going to round 159.0909, but we're just going to say for simplicity, what I'm telling you is every single square foot in this house costs $160. So when we want to know cost per square foot, there we go. So this square foot costs $160, that one over there, that one in the kitchen, every single one, every single square foot in this house costs $160. Similar to land, when we want to know how much does each acre cost, you take the total cost of the land, say the land goes for $1 million. There are 60 acres. What are the total number of acres? If we take $1 million cost divided by 60 acres, we're found that each, and isn't that funny how that both worked out? Every single acre costs $16,667. How much does acre number 1 cost? $16,667. How does acre number 15 cost? If we were to divide this land into acres, the question is, what could we sell an acre for? And to find that, we're going to take the cost of the entire lot, divide it by the number of acres to get cost per acre. So cost per square foot, cost per acre. Questions on this one? We're going to see this verbiage again when we get to Unit 17. Unit 17 is our appraisers unit. So this is kind of introducing you guys to talk like an appraiser. Yes, we're going to divide. So when we see the word per in this case, it's just a fancy word for divide. Why do we divide by 60? Because there are 60 acres in this lot that I just made up off the tippy top of my head. That's as valid as it is. The cost is $1 million. There are 60 acres. Cost per acre says we take $1 million divided by 60, and we learn that each acre in this land costs $16,667. Questions on this? I better watch. This coffee's gone down really well this morning. I might be jacked up in about 10 minutes. That makes for fun math, doesn't it? I need to slow down a little bit. I guess so. I don't really like to do this because we are recording and we got to keep moving forward. Okay. Thank you. Another shape. Now I told you that we just need to know how to measure squares, rectangles, and triangles. So let's introduce you to a funny sounding shape, a funny looking shape. And before we get all too excited, we'll talk about it. But another shape to introduce you guys to is something called a trapezoid. What the heck is a trapezoid? Well, simmer down. Hang on. Give me a second. The best example I can offer you in real estate of a trapezoid would be a bay window. So you have a piece of the property, maybe it's the dining room, the kitchen, the breakfast area, and then it has this bay window that kind of juts out. It's bigger than that side of the home. So we need to measure the room that it's in, but if it's measurable space in the bay window, then we need to count that little area as well. Now, here's the good news. I don't have a formula to measure a trapezoid, but what I can do is I can take that trapezoid up and I can chop it up into different parts, into shapes that I can measure. So let's take this bay window and let's put it flat on a piece of paper. And if we were looking at this bay window is going to look something like this. And then the rest of the home kind of comes out like this. So this might be your dining room, for example, or your breakfast area. It's called a breakfast area. So your breakfast area, and then within your breakfast area, you have this bay window that pops out, if you can count it. Again, we're going to talk about what counts and what doesn't when we get to Unit 8. I think a general rule of thumb, with all the other things that we got to learn about, if you can walk on it, you can count it. So if this is a bay window with a bench, I can't count it. If it's a bay window you can walk out on, and it meets the other criteria that we're going to talk about in Unit 8, then we can count it. So what we need to do with this trapezoid, because I don't have a formula for this, thank goodness. What we need to do with this trapezoid is to break it up into shapes that I can measure. So if I can take this trapezoid and bust it up into 2 triangles and a rectangle, does everybody see that? I have a triangle here, I have a rectangle here, and I have a triangle here. Does everybody see that? And this answers the question because, guys, can we all agree that not all houses are perfect squares and rectangles? Would everybody agree with me? Some of them are, sure, but not all of them are perfect squares and rectangles. So when you come across one that's not, how do you measure that? You may have to chop it up into shapes that you can measure. Does that make sense? And that's exactly what we did with this trapezoid here. So what I want to do, let's look, we're going to go to the book. We're going to look at this, and I'm going to redraw it a little bit better so we can look at the book. So let's go to the book. Let's go to page 83. And let's walk this through. So 83 gives me dimensions. It tells me the top. Why is my buttons not working today? It tells me the top of the triangle is 6 feet. The base of the triangle is 10 feet. And then the width of it is going to be the same for both sides. The width of it is 4 feet. So there's 4 feet here and 4 feet here. So again, we're on page 83. There you go. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this shape and we're going to just chop it up. So the first thing we're going to measure is for the rectangle. What is the formula for the rectangle? We're going to take the length. Is it me or is it my clicker? It's probably me. We're going to take the length times the width. Everybody see that? We're looking at first the rectangle. The length of my rectangle is 6 feet. The width or the height is 4. So 6 times 4. So what's the square footage of my rectangle? 24 square feet. Do I have everybody so far? Are you seeing what I see? I'm asking you to get in my mind. Good luck. So we're chopping it up. Length times width. So now what we have solved for is the rectangle. Now we need to go back and I got 2 triangles, don't I? So now we need to go back. Here's a triangle. Again, what's our formula for the triangle? We take length times width. Oops. That way you can see it. Length times width. So let's agree with this. This is where I think troubles people. Didn't I just use up 6 of the square feet for my rectangle? Didn't I just use up 6? That's the top part. The base or the bottom part is 10, right? So because I've used 6, I have 4 left to go. And because I have 2 triangles, I can determine that each base of each triangle is 2. What is 6 plus 2 plus 2? 6 plus 2 plus 2, that's right, is 10. That equates my bottom base. Does everybody see this? I use 6 for the rectangle. I have 4 square feet left. What the heck am I going to do with those 4 square feet? I'm going to divvy them up between the triangles. So now when we look at length times width of each triangle, this triangle's length is 2. The width is still 4. The width is still 4. And with a triangle, remember, we're going to divide it by 2. Chop it in half. So 2 times 4 is 8 divided by 2 gives us 4. And so I thought. So each triangle is 4 square feet. And then we just add. I got 24 for the rectangle. I got 4 for each triangle. So how much square foot is this bay window that I need to add to? 32 square feet. Chop it up. For both of your exams, mine and the state exam, you do get blank scratch paper. Blank. Everybody know what blank means? You start with blank scratch paper, and it's just that. It's for you to make these kind of notes. It's for you to do this kind of thing if it appears on the test. Questions? I got a little extra practice on this trapezoid. I'll show you guys in just one second. Guys, here's the good news. The math that we just covered is all you need to know for your tests. There's more math in Unit 4 than what you need to know. So as you guys are studying Unit 4, when you get to math that we just didn't cover, ignore it. Move on. Don't waste your study time on it. We're just going to focus on what we need to know. And yes, there is more in Unit 4. There used to be a whole lot more math on your tests. Seems like every revision, you guys have less math and less math. For the rest of us, like, man, I'm not the only math nerd on this call, am I? Do I have others? Do I have other fellow math nerds? Thank you, guys. Thank you for not letting me feel alone out here. Thank you. The rest of you, I know when I say math, you want to throw rotten tomatoes at me. I get it. Yeah.
Question. I just want to say, just in case someone else doesn't get, the way I solved the trapezoid is completely different than what you did. Like you completely lost me, but when I did it my way, I came up with the same answer.
Okay, so please share.
Okay. What I do to find a trapezoid, and I don't know if I read this in one of my, I like reading stuff to keep my mind busy. So I'm not sure where I learned this, if it was in the book or not, but I just like the 6 foot and the 10 foot, I add those two together and then divide it to make a triangle shape. I mean, to make like a rectangle, like a square shape. And then like the 4 and the 4 foot sides, I plus those and divide it to get my thing. And then so then like I know to times 8 foot by 8 foot to get, sorry, I said that wrong. I just do it differently. I make one big square instead of break it into like
Instead of
three
breaking it
shapes.
into the trapezoid. I got you. I
Yeah.
got you. So
Okay.
yeah. And guys, this is the fun thing about math. If your brain, there are so many different ways to get to the math. So if your brain sees it differently, remember all we're looking for on your exam is the right answer. So as long you could guess right and get the math right, you got a 25% chance, right? Even if you just say, what's your favorite? C, I don't care. You got a 25% chance of getting it right. So thank you, Erica, for sharing that. Absolutely. And that's honestly, that's one thing I enjoy so much about the math is that there are multiple ways to see it. And quite frankly, I don't care how you get to C as long as you get to C. Questions? I know we're a little bit early for a break, but don't go anywhere just yet. I do want to go ahead because the rest that we have to do, we're going to, let you guys work some problems. So before we get started, I got a couple for you guys. So before we get started on that though, again, I hate to start something and then not being able to finish it. So let's go ahead and take our break now. When we come back, I'm going to let you guys work a couple problems together. And then the good news is we just got a little bit more math left to cover today, like for a millisecond. But once we get through these two problems after break, then we're done with math, except for that teeny tiny little piece for the day. So is that good news? So go get your last shot of coffee or whatever it is I need to go eat a cracker or something to to absorb some of that caffeine. We come back and we'll finish up. So here's 10. No Kahoot today, not today. Maybe Thursday. Welcome back. So cameras are coming on. I'm getting ready to take attendance. So cameras are on and I can see you, always twofold. So I am taking attendance. Everybody say cheese. And now let's put some problems up for you guys. So I want you guys to tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. And I have taken attendance, so please make sure you tell me you're back. Give you about 30 more seconds, then we'll talk about it. Okay. So what do we do first when we see a math problem? What do we do first? Just read. Just read. Breathe and read, read and breathe. See how that rhymes and everything? All right. So a lot with a depth of 80 feet and an area of 4,800 square feet was sold for $350 per front foot. What was the total sales price? Is anybody else a visual person? Anybody like pictures? Yeah, I do too. Again, you got scratch paper. So I encourage you on your exam to use your scratch paper. And particularly when I'm dealing with lot and dimension problems, I like to see what it is. I like to take the word problem and put it in a picture. So the problem tells me that I have a depth of 80 feet. I have total square feet of 4,800. Do I know the front foot? Not yet, but don't I have the tools to find it? So the first thing that we need to do in this problem is find that front foot. And this is where I think the T-bar, because I got to divide something. If length times width gives me square feet, then I know to find the front feet, I have to divide something. So our T-bar tells us square feet goes on top, length is the bottom left, which in this case is my X, and 80 goes in the bottom right. So now we take on our not so smart calculators, 4,800 and divide it by 80. And I get 60 front feet. Questions so far? Particularly with multi-step problems, I think it's wise sometimes for you guys to stop and check yourself. What's our basic formula? Length times width equals square feet. So now that we think we have a length, can't we stop and check ourselves? Everybody pick up your calculator and say 60 times 80. What do you get when you multiply 60 times 80? You get 4,800. So is that 60, right? This is what I mean by check ourselves. Okay. So now that we know the front feet, next we're told that it sold for $350 per front foot. We already know that every single front foot costs $350. That's what that means. Every single front foot costs $350. We now know there's a total of how many front feet? There's a total of 60. So we take 350 times 60 and we get the cost, or A. Remember our other formula, cost per square foot. So to find cost per square foot, what's the opposite of divide? Multiply. So how do you work backwards from a problem? You do the opposite of what the formula tells you. The formula said cost per square foot. Again, check yourself. If you were to take the cost, divide it by 60, you would get total of 350 front feet or per front feet. So sometimes you guys, it's just a matter of playing with the numbers. You know, we only have 3 numbers in this whole problem. So we took the cost, I'm sorry, the cost of each front foot. Yeah, that per can throw you off, and that, please hear me when I say it sometimes means divide. Just because you say the word per isn't an automatic divide. Sometimes it means divide. So cost per square foot, cost per acre. That's when we're saying divide. Questions on this one? Okay. Let's try another one, and then I'll show you guys where I can, typical, Laura, typical. So that's good though. So let's do one. Yeah.
So I have a question. So the total sales price, it doesn't click to me because it's 350 times 60 and it's asking for the total sales price, but we only got the front foot. That's why I stopped and I was confused. So the answer to this is 21,000?
Because we're told, and that's a great question, Britt, thank you. We're told that the cost is square feet was sold for $350 per front foot. So we know every single front foot costs $350. So if we take, now that we know there's 60, so the total price is $350 per front foot for every single front foot. So that's why we stopped there, because we learned that's how they determine in this particular lot. That's how they determine that cost, 350 per front foot. The key was that we had to find the front feet. So now that we found that front feet, now we could find that cost. I think a lot, no, I don't think, I know. This is where the practice, because we're trying to wrap our brains around some new terminology, right? Some new verbiage. You guys are learning how to speak broker. And so it's a new way of seeing and thinking things. And trust me, this is where I have plenty, always have plenty of practice for you guys when we do the math. Okay, let's try another one. Tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. About 30 more seconds, then we'll talk about it. Okay. So how many acres are contained in a rectangular land parcel that has a length of 175 feet and a depth of 685? Taking what I know from the problem and giving myself a visual. Front feet or the length is 175. The depth or the width is 685. What's our basic formula for finding square footage? Length times width. By the way, if you were to pick up a plat map, if you were to look at a legal description, it's actually going to say that the lot is 175 by 168 by 685. So when you look at a lot description, a legal description, it actually gives you the formula. It tells you the length by, meaning times, multiply the depth. So we know length times width gives us square feet. So I take 175 times 685, and I get total square feet of 119,875 square feet. Questions so far? How I got here? Now that we know that number, we know this lot has 119,875. If the answer choices were cooperating with you, is 119,875 more than or less than 43,560? It is more than. So if you had an answer choice that was less than an acre, couldn't you go ahead and eliminate that right away? Again, this problem doesn't cooperate with you. But just looking at the numbers sometimes, we might be able to eliminate, give yourself better odds of getting it right. When it comes to square footage, I am a big fan of the T-bar. I will do it both ways, but that helps us see. I know I have to divide something. And what the T-bar, 875, and what the T-bar does is it helps me know what to divide. So square feet goes on top. Acres, in this case, my X goes on the bottom left. And then my magic number of 43,560 always goes on the bottom right. That's the key to this T-bar. Instead of using rate or percent, we're going to use that 43,560. Back fourth line. Yeah. Did I hear a question? No. I'm hearing things now. That's great. Back fourth line means divide. So on your calculator, you take 119,875, divide it by 43,560. How many acres? A. Questions on this one? My question to you guys is always, if you didn't get it right, do you see where you went wrong? Do you see why? And that's how we learn, you guys. That's why we give you plenty of practice. That's why we give you the solutions so you can go back and check yourself. You're gonna make mistakes when you're learning this math. You've got to be okay with that. But I think I asked you guys this last week. Do you want to work the kinks out and make the mistakes now? Or do you want to wait and figure it out on test day? I can't answer that question for you. That's up to you guys. If you want to work the kinks out and make the mistakes now, you'll take advantage of the practice problems that we offer you. You take advantage of what's available to help you solidify, to help you get this information. So with the Unit 4 math, well, first off, to officially wrap up Unit 4, you'll remember we did the non-math last week. So all the key terms for Unit 4 are on page 71. There's a key point review. Remember, Unit 4 is just short and sweet and to the point. It's that key point review. The summary is on page 81. And then you have a student quiz, 82 and 84. There is a little bit of math. Again, there's more math in the student quiz than what you need to know. So if you get to it, if we didn't talk about it and you don't want to mess with it, just cross it out. For the Unit 4 math, we talked about the math concepts, some of the math concepts on page 80. Again, if we didn't talk about it, don't worry about it. That math facts section at the back of your book that we introduced you guys to first day, there's some pages that talk about measuring square foot, measuring a triangle, measuring a trapezoid. So you got a little additional practice back there on page 775, 779, another way to see it. And then there's those 50 problems in the back of the book. Anytime we do math, I'm going to tell you what numbers on those 50 problems in the back of the book relate to the math that we just did. We're taking these 50 problems in the back of the book and we're going to divvy them up. We're going to tell you this is what we covered in Unit 4. I always consider the 50 problems in the back of the book as like 201 math problems. So start with the end of the unit. Once you master the end of the unit in the online learning system, then do the problems in the back of the book. I have heard instructors say that if at the end of this class, you can do those 50 problems in the back of the book, you're good for the math for the exams. So we got to build up to it in some cases. We got to get there by practicing the 101 stuff. So as you guys are practicing, again, these are the numbers that relate to the math that we just covered. Teeny tiny bit of math at the end of Unit 5. One quick blip about math at the end of Unit 5. And guys, we don't touch math again until we get to Unit 8. So I'm giving you guys got a couple weeks to work on the math from Unit 3, work on the math from Unit 4, work on those, incorporate those in your study time. I think some of you say, I'll wait till the end and figure out all the math then. If you have a head for math, that might work for you. If you don't, please break it up into chunks. Do Unit 3 math, do Unit 4 math. Remember, I'm always available to help. The other thing I want to point out to you guys, the online learning system, there's nothing in Unit 4, but does everybody see in Unit 5 and there's this 20 question quiz? At the end of this is some additional math from Unit 4. So I hope you guys are going through and doing these quizzes. I know a few of you had problems accessing the online learning system at the beginning. Lane sent an email out last week with a tutorial. If you didn't get in, please watch that video from Lane. If you're still having problems in the online learning system or accessing anything, please reach out to Jane. Jane can't help you if she doesn't know you're having problems getting in. Please do not wait until the day before the test and say, I was never able to get in the online learning system. It is too late then. How many of you guys are working through the online learning system? Now, doing the quizzes, perfect. The PowerPoints, awesome, you guys. I think this is the best tool we have to offer you. Because when we read this question, I'm not going to read it, I'm just going to select an answer, and I say confirm, guess what? Right or wrong, it tells me why. And that's the biggest benefit of this. That's the tool of this, is because it gives you that explanation. And then don't forget too, we have our very own, I think we're kind of special. We have our very own Campbell folder, our tentative schedule. Again, when we leave class, I try to tell you what we're going to cover and when each class. And then also remember, all of my PowerPoints are in here as well. So if you want to go at your own pace, if you want to go back through and look something, we're recording. and we have the PowerPoints available to you guys. So we're working through each unit, and then we're spending time in that Campbell folder too. And if you're not seeing what I'm seeing right now, call Jane or email Jane. Fair enough. Can I get some thumbs ups? Good. Okay, I need to stop sharing just for 1 second. Please bear with me so you guys can all wave at each other. And we started on Unit 5 last week. Remember, we skipped around a bit because I don't like to do too much math in one day. So last week we started on Unit 5, which we're talking about title, and we're talking about how we can transfer that title. And we said title was the idea of ownership. Deed is the actual documentary evidence. You know, you can stand in front of a judge all day long and say, this is my property, mine, I'm the owner of the record. And the judge is going to say, I hear what you're saying, but where's your proof? Show me you're the owner of the record. And that's when you pull your deed out and say, see, I am the owner of record. On page 86, we introduced you guys to the idea of the givor and the receivee. The givor, the OR of the document, is the one giving it. The EE is the one receiving it. So particularly in this unit, we're talking about the deed with the grantor. The grantor is the givor of the deed, also known as the seller. Then we have the grantee, who's the receivee of the deed, also known as the buyer. We need to know those ORs and EEs. It is way too easy to ask you about the buyer and the seller on your exam. So we need to be familiar with those ORs and EEs. And as you can see, we got more in this class to talk about. ORs and EEs, we'll revisit this. We talked about on page 87, the essential elements of a valid deed. And remember, when we're talking about the essential elements of a valid deed, the judge is the one that gets to determine if the document is valid or not. So when the judge is looking for the validity of the deed, this is what the judge is looking for on page 87. Remember, we said to think about the essential elements is like cake ingredients. Don't you need required ingredients to make a cake? Has anybody ever tried to bake a cake without flour? I've not, but I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have cake. You'd have a big pan of goo or something, right? You got to have all those required ingredients to be able to call a cake. And that's what we're saying on page 87. We're looking for these required ingredients to call it a valid deed. Over on page 88, we looked at some things that enhance the cake. They're not required, but they sure make the cake better. Who likes that rose icing on the top of a birthday cake? That rose, yep. Doesn't that make it better? That's what we're looking at on page 88, the additions, the things that we often see, but the judge is not looking for when they're trying to determine the validity. Then we talked about different ways that we can transfer property. And the first method we talked about was voluntarily. You do it in your own free will. And if you're voluntarily alienating, giving away your deed, your property, there we go, then we're going to use it with the deed. Let me say that again. I just jumped that all. Okay. If you're voluntarily selling or gifting your property, you're going to do it with the deed. There we go. And there are a couple different deeds that we talked about. General warranty deed is the most common, hands down, the most common. Special warranty deed we typically see in foreclosures. Bargain and sale deed, we don't do much with these in North Carolina. Bargain and sale deeds have no express warranty. Over on page 90, what we do typically see in North Carolina is a quitclaim deed. It's a non-warranty deed. There are no express warranties. There are no implied warranties. And then we got some other different special purpose deeds, page 90 to 91 in North Carolina that we might see. A question comes in. Good question. Why don't we include the price in the deed? And that's a great question. And honestly, I wish I had the answer for that. But if we go back to page 87, it tells us that consideration is something that the judge looks for. But what we don't typically see is the exact amount. Usually we see some kind of verbiage down there, like for $10 paid in good and valuable consideration. You guys see that in quotes? I don't know why. I don't know why they list that $10 and not the actual price. I don't know. Maybe it's nobody's business how much I pay for my house. I don't know. I don't know. But for some reason, it's the verbiage that they use, and that looks very similar. $10 paid in good and valuable consideration. So I guess that good and valuable consideration makes up the difference between your purchase price and the $10. Over on page 88, one of our additional items, the third bullet point down there, they do not have to include a statement as to the exact amount of consideration. So we're not looking for the exact purchase price. I think all they're looking for, the purpose of that $10 is just to show that something of value changed hands, money changed hands in exchange for the property. So that got us to where we are right now. We've talked about our voluntary method. Do I have any questions up until this point? Things that we've covered so far? The one method to transfer your title is voluntary. We do that with a deed. Maybe it's for sale, maybe it's a gift, love and affection. Another method to transfer property is involuntarily, which means you're not doing it on your own free will. Involuntary alienation means the judge is taking your property from you for whatever reason. And there's a couple different methods, a couple different reasons why. I think we pointed out the figure on the top of page 52, kind of gives us a nice little summary. The first involuntary alienation, the first method that the judge or the courts may take your property, is called escheat. When an individual passes away without a will or without heirs, the property is taken via escheat. Escheat, write this down. Escheat, no will, no heirs. No will, no heirs. We will talk about what happens if you have heirs. We will talk about what happens if you have a will. Escheat, no will, no heirs. The individual passes away, they don't have a will, they can't find heirs. The state or the government's going to take the property and do with it as they choose. The second method that we might lose our property via involuntary alienation, and I know you guys have heard of this one. Have you heard of something called eminent domain? This pops up on the news every once in a while. People generally do not like this. There was a case in Florida not too long ago. Happens everywhere, probably more often than what we realize. So eminent domain is the right of the government to take your land for public good. Maybe they're taking the whole entire land. Maybe they're just taking some of your front feet to widen the road or put in sidewalks. Does anybody live in an area where we see a road widening project going on? It's a 2-lane road and they're turning it into 4 or 5. They're taking those individual parts of those individual property owners to make for those additional lanes, to widen that road. Yes, ma'am, Desiree.
I do know that a lot of Native American reservations, the government does implement eminent domain to
There you
take
go.
over Native reservations for like oil rights and drilling rights. I do know there's a
Absolutely.
big thing in Alaska about that, water rights. casino privileges and things of that nature. So yeah, I am familiar with eminent domain, but usually it's not in the most positive.
People
you know,
typically don't like
process.
this, do they?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Desiree. So yeah, I mean, it happens, like I said, I mean, it could happen in your own, if you live off of Highway 66 between High Point and Kernersville, you guys driven up there lately, they're probably taking your land because it looks like they're getting ready to widen that. You could be in different parts of the country, out west or up in Alaska where they're taking the land. And as we, yeah, people generally aren't fans of this. If the government takes your land, they will offer you just compensation. The reason why I have just compensation in quotation marks, they're going to pay you for what they determine the value is of the land that they're going to take. So if they're taking part of your front foot to widen the road, if they're going to take your whole property, they are going to determine what's that worth, and they're going to pay you. So they're not just going to take it without giving you something. They're going to give you just compensation. What they don't take into consideration, remember the example we just gave of they took a 2-lane road and they widened it to a 5-lane road, or even a 3-lane road, maybe a 2-lane with a turn lane. What they don't take into consideration is the fact is that your property is now that much closer to the road. Could that affect your overall value? You did have a nice big front yard. Now you walk off your front step and careful you don't hit oncoming traffic. You guys with me? That is where the people argue. That is what the people don't like. Yeah, they're going to pay you for what they think it's worth, but what they're not going to compensate you for is the lost value of the property in general. If you have kids or pets, right? Or you just don't pay attention when you walk off your front porch, then that could be a big concern. I have heard of some people, they get the letter that the government's coming to take eminent domain, they call their attorney and they try to fight it. Most of the stories I've heard in my career, they don't win. I've heard of like one that does. My question was, who is your attorney? Because that's the name and number I need to give out. But I guess my point is from, and I don't have firsthand experience in this, but my experience in dealing with people, everything out there, it's a tough battle. It's a tough battle. If they take the whole property and a tenant is in place, there's a valid lease with a tenant in place, and that's going to terminate the lease. So if they eminent domain, they take the whole property, and the tenant does have rights. We're not just going to kick the tenant out on the street. The tenant does have rights. We're going to talk all about the landlord-tenant relationship in Unit 11. I got a whole unit dedicated to the landlord and the tenant, so we'll see that again. So eminent domain. Another method of involuntary alienation is foreclosure. Failure to make your mortgage payment after X amount of payments means that the mortgage company can foreclose on you and take your property so they can satisfy their debts, so they can pay their debts. So foreclosure would be involuntary alienation. We have 2 units dedicated to financing. Units 14 and 15 are our financing units. We'll talk more about foreclosures, why the bank would take your property, how they can take your property, all that good stuff when we get to units 14 and 15. And then the other method of involuntary alienation we have is something called adverse possession. Let's pause and back up for a second. You guys remember last week we were talking about easements, and we talked about an easement by prescription. And we said an easement by prescription says somebody's been using your land for long enough. For example, after 20 years, they can go to the court and they can say, my fence has been on this person's land for the last 20 years. Create an easement for me to give the fence permanent permission to be there. Everybody remember easement by prescription? Now let's take that a step further. And that step further is called adverse possession. Now the claimant is going to the judge and saying, for example, My fence has been on this property for 20 years. Give me the property. I'm not trying to create an easement. I want that portion of the property that I've been using. You could lose your land if the judge rules in favor of adverse possession. It could be the whole entire land. It could just be that back corner where their fence is. So adverse possession, the claimant, for some reason, maybe it's something they made up in their mind, I don't know. But for some reason, they have reason to believe that this land is theirs. They go to the judge and ask the judge to give them that piece of the land. So with adverse possession, the period of time, how long do you use somebody's land before you can go claim it? And the answer to that is it depends. Color of title is some kind of faulty document that gives you reason to believe that the land is yours. Remember our example last week where grandma passed away and she left her home to the 12 grandkids and all 12 of those grandkids were married. And so now we got 24 people that need to show up on closing day to sign that deed. That one person, that one spouse that didn't show up, they may be able to claim color of title because they have reason to believe that the land is theirs because they never signed the deed to convey it. Maybe when grandma passed away, you were going through grandma's stuff and you found an old deed and you said, sweet, here's land I didn't know about that grandma owned. That may give you color of title. It's some kind of reason to believe that the land is yours. For adverse possession, if you do not have color of title, if you do not have a reason to believe that the land is yours, the courts require you use it for 20 years before you claim adverse possession. If you do have color of title, you could go claim adverse possession within 7 years. So if you have that faulty document, if you have that reason to believe, 7 years, you take this to the judge and you say, adverse possession. Isn't that interesting? In order for a claimant to claim adverse possession, the judge is going to ask a series of questions. Those questions can be remembered by knowing the mnemonic ocean. The judge is going to ask, is the use open? Is it well known to others? You're not hiding the fact that you're using the land. I mean, if you're scooting in there in the middle of the night, using the land and then cleaning up, before the sun rises, you're not using it openly. Can you hide a fence? Can you hide a shed? Can you hide a camper moved to the back part of the lot? So the use is open. It's very clear that the claimant is using the property. It's open. The use is continuous, which means it's lasting. It's uninterrupted. You're not moving the RV on and off the lot. You're moving the RV on a lot and you're keeping it there for 7 years or 20 years, depending. The use is exclusive, which means there can only be one claimant. You don't have multiple people showing up claiming adverse possession. It's exclusive, meaning there's only one. The judge is going to make sure it's adverse, which makes sure the judge, let me rephrase that, the claimant has to intend to claim the land. That's their purpose. The claimant must intend to claim the land. And then the judge is going to see if it's notorious. If it's notorious, you're using it without permission of the owner. This is what's hard for us to get. We're going to talk about squatters and all that good stuff. But the truth is, the way our laws are set up, the way our courts are set up, it's a lot harder to get somebody off your property than what you may think. And the best way to prevent somebody from claiming your land in 20 years is to give them permission to be there. Once you give them permission, it's no longer notorious, and the judge can't give your land away via adverse possession. Now, you gave them permission. Now, how do you get it off? Well, that's where your attorney comes in to help you. But if you've had somebody's fence on your land for 19 and a half years, you may want to think about giving them permission, because no one in 6 months they could claim adverse possessions. Everybody with me? The judge is going to say, did you have permission to be there? And if they say yes, this case is over. They have to be using it without permission. I think the fence or the corner of the shed is a good example. I do think that there are some times when the whole land can get taken. Have you guys ever seen abandoned property? The house has fallen down, has been mowed in about 20 years, 15 and a half years. If you're not paying attention to that property, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, somebody's been living on it the whole time, and you never, ever go check on it. You just pay the taxes every year, so nobody's bothering you. Couldn't that person say, I've had my RV on this land for the last 20 years. I've been using it. Judge, just give it to me. The judge goes through Ocean. They claim adverse possession, and guess what? You've lost that entire abandoned property. Here's a good, thank you. It's hard to find a real life example because it doesn't happen that often, but the fact is it can happen. So somebody says the man that they bought their land from lost 50 acres due to adverse possession. The judge just says, you're right. You've been using it. You've been the only one. You stood in front of me and claimed it. Let me sign over this portion of the deed to you. Isn't that something? Adverse possession. Yeah.
I finally understood now why where I live, there's like three different sections, or two different sections of land, like one that back up to my property, it's like 14 acres. And then on the other side of that, there's like another 14 acres with an abandoned house. Now I understand why both landowners that don't live around here is like, sure, go on it, do whatever you want.
You can't show up later, Erica, and say, mine, I want it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Give them permission to be there. Absolutely. Absolutely. If the judge grants adverse possession, or let me rephrase that, if there's any lawsuit required to settle a dispute, that lawsuit is referred to the action to quiet title. Action to quiet title says we have adverse possession. Let's quiet this by, legally doing what we need to do, but giving adverse possession. Action to quiet title is the legal process. A question comes in about trespassing signs. That's an interesting question because technically with trespassing signs, you're not giving them permission. So now the question is, what about the rest of Ocean? Have they been using it openly? Have they been using it continuously, exclusive? Is it adverse? So just putting up a sign, you're off to a good start. I think the point that we're trying to make, the point that Erica's certainly making, check in on your land every once in a while. If you've, moved away, if you've abandoned it, check in on it every once in a while. See if you have somebody living there. Oh, good. Let's look at an example together, because I know the question is, how does this apply to us? When could this come into play for us? So let's look at an example that may answer that question. A broker, let's say you are contacted by a prospective client. They want to sell 5 acres of land. The client then goes on to say, while they have no deed, he and his father have been farming the land for over 25 years without any objection whatsoever from the owner. As the real estate agent, as the broker, that's where our little red flag goes up. When the seller says, I don't have a deed, stop and ask questions. While potential adverse possession may exist, the client must first prove to a court. Does that say prove to a broker? No, they got to prove to a court that he and his father have met all requirements to obtain title by adverse possession. The broker should advise the person to consult an attorney and should not list the property until the issue is resolved. I can't list it and sell it for you until I can verify that it's yours. And you and I could have this conversation all day long until we're blue in the face, but it doesn't matter what we decide, does it? This comes down to the court. We are going to talk, we're going to start introducing you guys to the idea of looking out for little red flags, pulling the deed, making sure before you list the property that the people you think are going to sell the property are the rightful owners per the deed. We're starting to get into our role, and we're going to hear more and more about this. So instead of no trespassing, you want a sign that says trespass, but don't claim. I take pictures of it, right? You're still not giving them permission, but again, the judge is going to ask Ocean. Based on that, the judge will determine. So we had voluntary methods of alienation. We had involuntary methods of alienation. Another method, the third method of transferring title, is by descent. If you lose your property by descent, you don't have a will, you passed away, the individual has passed away, you don't have a will, but you do have heirs. Remember, Escheat, no will, no heirs. Descent, no will. If the state can find heirs, then they may be able to transfer that property to the heirs and let the heirs deal with it. How hard do they look? How far do they go? What are they looking for? I have no idea. You lose your property, or if the individual loses their property by descent, they have a will. I'm sorry, no will, but they do have heirs. Heirs are found. And then the fourth method to transfer title is a will. Will lists out the heirs. Wills tell you, upon my demise, this is what I want to have happen to my property. So escheat is no will, no heirs. Descent is no will. Will. Just to get some of this verbiage down, in a will, a devise is typically transferring real property. A bequest is transferring personal property. If you don't have a will, if your family doesn't have a will, please go get one. I know this isn't the easiest conversation to have. I know we don't like to have this discussion, but bottom line, if something happens to you, do you want to lose your property to the state? Do you want the state of North Carolina to say, sweet, I just got land? Or do you want your property and belongings to go on to your loved ones so they can benefit from you? That's the difference of having a will or not. I'm not going to lie, y'all. My husband and I just got our very first will this past January, like 2 months ago. Do it. It offers a peace of mind. Again, it's not the easiest of conversations. Unfortunately, we witnessed a situation last year where my best friend lost her husband at a young age. It's never too young. We stood back and watched that. Guess what? Today we have wills. That's my free piece of advice for you today. Questions, comments? If you're married, yeah, remember wills don't kick into place, but what if something happens to both of you? Anybody like to travel with your significant other? We got to think about all the what ifs. Other questions or comments? I need to pick us back up. All right. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into this more about title insurance and these public records. I know we kind of danced around title and public records last week. So let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to hit those head on. So let's take 10. We back? All right. You guys hear the alarm, right? On the timer? Okay, good, good. How do your dogs feel about those? They go a little nuts. They'll be used to
Actually, for me, it's my bird.
your. That's funny.
I don't know if you can hear him right now, but yeah, it gets him going.
He's squawking at me.
Yeah, he starts squawking. Yeah, he will eventually mimic this sound. He eventually will get it.
Awesome. That'll be a great reminder of you to pre-licensing for years to come, won't it? All right, so we are back. Cameras are on, and I can see you, and I am taking attendance. The I can see you part is the second piece of it. Okay, so I had a question come in over a break about study groups, and I'm a fan of study groups as long as you almost need one person to keep you guys on point, because it's so easy for study groups to get off. And when you spend your study time in a study group talking about things other than pre-licensing, what's the point of a study group? So once upon a time ago, when we were in person face-to-face, you guys would form friendships and relationships. You guys would create your own study groups on breaks, outside in the hall, whatever. Probably the biggest disadvantage we have with Zoom is you guys don't have the ability to actually be together, meet each other. What I will do, because I do want to help connect you guys. So what I will do today after class, if you're interested in a study group, stay on after class, and you and your peers can exchange phone numbers or emails or whatever it is that you want to do to connect. So I'll leave the call open. I'm not going to be here. I've never been involved in a study group, and I don't plan on starting now. So I'll let you guys have that conversation. I'm going to go to the kitchen and get some lunch. But if you want to exchange numbers and phone numbers or emails, so you can start figuring out when you want to meet, how you want to meet. In person might be difficult because, as we learned on the first day, we're scattered all over the state. We may not have everybody in the same location. A recommendation I have, if one of you in the study group, if one of you wants to create a private Facebook page, just a private one, just for you guys, so you can all get in together and answer questions, collaborate that way. But again, how you guys do it makes no difference to me if you want to, but I'll leave that open. I'll leave the call open so you guys can exchange information and kind of take off with that. Is that good? And decide early on who's going to be the person to keep you on point, because so many stories I've heard about you guys spending all your time socializing, that's not going to help you pass the test. So if you're getting in a study group, make sure you're here, to study. Question comes in, do I have office hours now? No, I'm in real estate. I work when my phone rings, so I don't have set dedicated hours. But I'm always available, and same thing with the study group. Again, I don't get involved in study groups, but with that being said, if you guys are stuck on something, or if there's anything I can help you with, I'm always here to help. So just reach out to me. Let me know how I can help. So I will leave this open. I'll stop recording so you guys won't be all over YouTube chit-chatting. So I'll stop recording. I'll leave the room, and you guys can exchange numbers and information. Is that good? Okay. Study groups work for some people. They don't work for all. Again, you almost have to go back in time to when you were in school. Remember how you learned best in school? That's probably going to be the primary method for you learning best as an adult. Does that make sense? So if study groups work for you back in school, I suggest staying on after one and forming that study group. Wake up. All right, so we talked about the 4 different methods of transferring title. So now we're going to get into more of what I call the attorney's role. What's the attorney's responsibility with all this? So before we get into this, let's have a quick refresher to what we first talked about at the beginning of Unit 5. Title is the right of ownership. It's the idea. It's the theory that you own property. The deed is your proof. It's the physical, tangible piece of paper or pieces of paper that you can touch to prove that it's yours. Both title and deed represent the owner's bundle of legal rights. And the main purpose of the deed, as we're going to learn, it protects you from other parties. Again, if we didn't have this documentary evidence, if we didn't have this tangible piece of paper, you go to the judge with a he said, she said. Well, he said this and she said it was my property and they told me this 20 years ago and da da da. The judge is going to say, show me your proof. And when the judge is asking for the proof, they're looking for the deed, that documentary evidence. That protects you from other parties. That proves that you are the owner of record. So on page 95, we get into, again, what I refer to as the attorneys section. The attorney, one of the first things that the attorney will do, the attorney represents the buyer in the transaction. The buyer hires the attorney. The seller is welcome to hire their own attorney. Any situation, anybody is always welcome to have their own legal representative. But in a typical residential sales transaction, the buyer hires the attorney. Everything the attorney does is in the best interest of their buyer client. And one of the best things that the attorney can do to protect their buyer client is to perform a very thorough search of the public records. First off, let's get this out here. Public records. Every single county in the state of North Carolina has a register of deeds. Public records are down at the register of deeds. Thanks to the internet, we can now look them up online. Please don't do it now, but after class, you can go to your county's GIS, and you can look up your property. Please don't do it now. You can look up your property and find the records that are available. So what I'm telling you is the public record search, who are these documents available to? The public, anybody can view them. If you don't have a computer, you go down the courthouse and you can view them. They're available to the public. However, it's not the public's job to perform the record search for the purpose of transferring title. That's the attorney's job. And they're looking for everything on record, not just the deed, but any recorded liens, any recorded documents that might affect the property. The attorney is helping to educate their buyer client on the property. And when the attorney finds liens on the property, the attorney knows that they need to have the seller pay those off before we can convey the title to the buyer. You guys remember our lien priority? We have all those people standing in line with their hand out, waiting to get paid, waiting for this thing to close. Give me my money, give me. The seller's at the very end of that line. And the seller can't convey title until all those lien holders have been paid. The attorney is assisting the buyer in making sure that they find all those lien holders in the public records and that they're getting those taken care of. So the whole point of putting documents on public records is to give notice. You're letting the world know, this is my property. See my deed? This is my property. If you're a lien holder, you're letting the world know that this person owes you money. We're giving notice to the public records. And when it comes to researching the deed, because the attorney will look at the current deed, but they're also going to go back and look at the previous deed and the previous deed and the deed before that, and the deed before that. And what the attorney is doing by looking at the deeds of the past are making sure that we have a chain of title. A chain of title is linking conveyances. This deed lines up with the previous deed. The previous deed lines up with the deed before that. Give me 1 second. Let me make sure I get this right. The grantor, the giver of this deed has to match the grantee on the previous deed. So whomever's listed as the grantor, what we're looking for with these linking conveyances is that the grantor of this deed is the grantee of the previous deed. Remember, give or and receivee. And if there's any kink in the chain, if you will, then the attorney will find that on behalf of their buyer client. That kink in the chain is referred to as a cloud on title, the defect in the title, and the attorney's gonna link it. The attorney's gonna make it right. Maybe we need to have, remember, grandma dies and 12 grandkids and all 12 grandkids are married, number 24 doesn't show up. Maybe we need to go back to number 24 and say, yeah, we need you to sign this. If 24 isn't available, the attorney can take it to the judge and ask them to quiet the title. Ask them to go through that legal process to fix these conveyances, to fix these links in the chain, so the attorney can assure that what they're handing their buyer client is this idea of clear marketable title. We got a whole unit dedicated to going to closing, the contract to closing process, what that looks like on the buyer's end and the seller's end. That's unit 21. So of course, the attorney will come back up in that conversation because they play a huge role. But their job is to make sure that their buyer client is getting this idea of clear marketable title. Make sure the deed that they're receiving is going to link. It's going to offer them that protection. So the seller delivers this marketable title to the buyer. If you were going to buy a home today, there's a really good chance you don't know this seller. You don't know them, you just want to buy their house. Maybe you do. But if you were buying a home today, would you trust a complete stranger when they said, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with my title, it's fine, I can hand it over to you? Would you trust that stranger? Everybody shake your head no. Absolutely not, Julie. Absolutely not. So when we say the seller must deliver it to the buyer, it's the buyer's attorney that determines if it's marketable. The seller's job is to hand it over. But we're not going to trust that the seller knows what they're handing over. How do we trust that? This is why we have attorneys to step in and make sure that what they're giving their buyer client is that marketable title. A question comes in, if you convey through a trust, will you be listed under the public records as the deed holder? It's to my understanding that the trustee, who's the attorney in that scenario, my understanding is that we'll have a trustee's deed until the grantor passes and it goes on to the beneficiary. So how are we going to handle that title? A lot of that could depend. So marketable title, again, we've mentioned this title search. The attorney is doing this deep dive in the public records. Yes, every single one of us can go look our property up this afternoon. If you don't own, you live somewhere, you can go look that property up. And you can see the documents that are available. But it's the attorney one. You guys see that word examination? The attorney is not just saying, okay, here's the public records. They're examining it. They're studying it. They're doing this deep dive to find anything and everything that can affect the title. And then the attorney, as a representative of the buyer, will get with the seller to clear up anything necessary. So if there's a kink in the chain, again, we can go ask the judge to quiet the title. If there's unpaid liens, the attorney will put those lien holders in order. Everybody will be paid before the seller. We got to find it to know how to handle it. Depending on the property, depending on the attorney, depending on the situation, the attorney might do an abstract of title. Let's think of an abstract title of the Cliffs Notes. They're still looking at the history, but maybe not the deep dive. I think maybe recently subdivided land, for example. If you have one tract of land that's 40 acres, and then you divide that into 40 lots, that one deed just turned to 40, didn't it, right? Each individual has their own deed for their own acre. So for example, new construction, as long as we can verify that the large tract of land was owned by the builder. It's just a Cliff's Notes. Once the attorney does their search, maybe they do a title search, a thorough title search, maybe they do the Cliff's Notes. The attorney is the one that offers their opinion of title. That is a legal thing. You and I cannot offer our opinion of title. That is the attorney's job, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. In North Carolina, we have something called the Marketable Title Act. And what this says is, generally speaking, the attorney can do the history. The attorney can trace the title back. And if they go 30 years without finding a kink, they can declare it marketable. If they find a kink, they may need to go back further. They need to address it. Remember, grandma died, 12 grandkids, all 12 grandkids were married. Number 24 doesn't show up. This is the kind of thing that the attorney's looking for, because we don't want number 24 to show up later down the road and say, I never signed it, so technically it's still mine. These are the kind of things that the attorney's looking for. So the Marketable Title Act says if we can go back 30 years and not find any issues, that's the key, not find any issues, the attorney can claim it marketable. If there's an issue, they'll address it. And they'll make it right before they convey this clear marketable title to their client. Guys, please understand, land is permanent. It's the structure that comes and goes. We want to make sure that your land is your land. Does that make sense? I had a pre-licensing student argue with me once, flat out argue. She said, I'm buying new construction. You and my agent tell me I have to have my attorney do a title search. But I'm buying new construction. I shouldn't have to have a title search. So she wasn't only arguing with me, she was arguing with her agent. She's a little thick-headed. But guys, what she was arguing is that the house was just being built. So she knows nobody can lay claim to the house. But what we couldn't get her to understand was, what about the land? What about the dirt? Somebody before you owned that land, even though you're putting the structure on. I don't know if we ever made progress with her or not. I'm not sure. She wasn't my client, so my problem. But I see what she was saying. She was looking at this thing being built, knowing that it was hers. You guys with me? So it's important that we get, they're not just verifying that the house is good. They're looking at the entire parcel, everything within that land. So the attorney does everything that they possibly can to make sure that their buyer client is getting this clear marketable title. Sometimes things are there that aren't public record. Sometimes things come up after the fact. Is a forged document going to be on public record? Is the person that forged this document going to say, this is a forged document, but I'm going to sign it anyway? You look like you have a signature. The attorney can say, well, yeah, that's the signature, so it looks good. But then we find out after the fact that it was forged and there's an issue on the title. You guys remember our discussion on mechanics liens? The mechanic has 120 days to file the lien. So if the seller does work a week before closing, we go to, don't pay the mechanic, we go to closing. Is that mechanic's bill going to be on the public record search the week before closing? No, they have 120 days to file it. So they're going to file it after closing. So there was no way to find it because it wasn't in public search. Is everybody with me? This is all the what ifs. And I think this is y'all's number one question. Why wouldn't the attorney find it? Why wouldn't the attorney do their job? They can only do so much, you guys. They can only look at what is there. So now the big question is, what if? What if the attorney can't or doesn't discover something? What if something comes up after the buyer buys that causes an issue to the title? And that is why the buyer purchases title insurance. Title insurance is protecting the current owner from errors of the past. The previous owner forged a document, the current owner is protected. The previous owner, what was the other example I just gave? The previous owner didn't file, the mechanic's lien didn't get filed. That is an error of the past. I think the word title confuses us. Block that for a second. What are we talking about here? We're talking about insurance. Insurance to protect your title. Do you guys have auto insurance? Do you guys have health insurance? Do you maybe have homeowners insurance or renters insurance? What does insurance do? It protects you if something goes wrong. So what does title insurance do? It protects your title. It protects your right to ownership if something goes wrong. There's no guarantee that the attorney can 100% find everything, specifically things that aren't there to find. If the buyer is getting a loan, title insurance is required, period, end of story. And there's actually going to be two policies, one for the owner, the current owner. Yesterday they were the buyer, today they're the owner. And there's also a policy for the lender, because they too have an interest. Remember, they're the ones that showed up on the day of closing that gave you money to purchase this home. Again, talking about the lender and their role, anything financing is units 14 and 15. If this is a cash buyer, title insurance is highly recommended. It's the lender that requires it. So if a lender's involved, title insurance is required. If it's a cash buyer, it's highly recommended. Of course, there would only be one policy because we do not have a lender involved. One thing that makes title insurance different from all other types of insurance, title insurance is a one-time fee. You don't have to renew it every year, every 5 years, anything like that. The buyer pays for their title insurance policy at closing as part of their closing costs. If a lender's involved, the buyer gets to pay for the owner's policy as well. Isn't that nice? So the buyer will pay for both of those policies one time at closing, and then they're covered. The buyer is covered for as long as they own the property. The lender is covered for as long as there's a loan out. Once that loan's paid, the lender's out. They no longer have an interest in the property. That's what we mean by that diminishing liability. So as we mentioned earlier, it's the attorney that communicates their opinion of title to the title insurance. The title insurance is not going to take it from the seller that everything is fine. Nothing can come up. It's the attorney that offers their opinion of title to the insurance company, and based on the attorney's opinion of title is whether or not the insurance company will release title insurance. Typically, most attorneys, when we go under contract, that's when they do, shortly after we go under contract, that's when they do their very thorough deep dive, very, very thorough investigation, because we want that contract to closing period to work out any kinks in that chain that the attorney might find. Right before closing, we'll talk about this whole process, I promise. Right before closing, one of the last things that the attorney is going to do is another quick title search to make sure nothing hit the title from the time they did the deep dive right when we went under contract, right? So we have a period of 2 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 months, whatever, from contract to close. And so they do this final, just a quick search right before closing to make sure nothing came up since when they did that deep dive. And based on that last quick search, right before closing, is when the title insurance will agree to offer their title opinion. Title insurance protects the current owner from errors of the past. Remember, we talked about the survey last week. Let's say, for example, you're working with a buyer and you get this buyer under contract and you suggest to your buyer that they have a survey done. And the buyer says, nope, I'm going to waive it. I'm going to save $500-600 and I'm not going to spend money on a survey. Can I make anybody do anything? Unfortunately, no. All I can do is explain to them the importance of why they should consider having a survey done. If my buyer waives that survey, am I going to get documentation from them that they waived it? I should see lots of head shaking yes, because what do we document? Everything. So when you look at your buyer and say, have a survey, and they say no, go home and follow that up with an email. Have that documentation that you explained it to them and had that conversation. So despite your efforts, they still declined to have a survey done. After closing, an encroachment, for example, is discovered. After closing, guess what? Title insurance isn't going to protect that new owner. Title insurance is going to say, had you had a survey done before closing, we would have discovered it and it would have been taken care of. But you chose not to do that, so I'm not here to cover you. The buyer's got to do their part, you guys. Everybody with me? So there's one more stick to try to get your buyer to get a survey. I'm not going to lie. The majority of buyers waive the survey. Blows my mind how many choose not to have a survey. It's our job to explain the importance of a survey and why they should consider it. Guys, please remember, we are fact finders. Just because I have a real estate license does not give me any right to look at somebody and say, you're going to do this and you're going to like it. We can't make anybody do anything. If you're here to make people do stuff, you may want to reconsider. What we do is explain the importance of the survey and then discuss what could happen if they don't. Everybody with me? And we're going to document. Please document. Do you think that buyer is going to go stand in front of a judge and say, yeah, my agent tried to tell me to get a survey done, but I didn't listen to her and I went against her and I did it anyway? Is the buyer going to say that? No. They're going to need to see your proof that you had that conversation. We know people. Has anybody ever worked with the public? Restaurants, retail stores? Yeah, we know people, don't we? You're going to be working with people. If you think they haggle over a $25 sweater, wait until they get over a $250,000 house. Everybody with me? Let's look at a couple examples together. Title policy is issued on July 12, 2017. It is later discovered that the 2010 deed to the seller was forged, thus making it void. Title insurance will indemnify the buyer because this title defect existed prior to the effective date and it couldn't have been discovered from a public record search. How in the world did it get discovered? I don't know. But the fact here is it did get discovered. It couldn't have been discovered before we bought, and that's why we have title insurance. Do we feel pretty good about title insurance? I think some buyers think, oh, it's a waste of money. Seriously? Do you know what can happen in your home ownership time? I don't have a crystal ball. Do you? If you do, can I buy it from you? Because I really want one. Like really, really want one. Let's look at another example together. A buyer's buying a home and declines to have a survey done before closing. Very common. After closing, the buyer discovers the neighbor's garage encroaches on the buyer's property by 2 feet. The title insurance policy is not going to compensate the buyer. Why? Had they had the survey done before we bought, we would have discovered that garage was an encroachment and it would have been addressed by the attorney. Buyers need to understand they have legal representation in this purchase of a home. They hire the attorney represents them in North Carolina. Questions or comments? Title insurance? I just want to pause here for 1 second. If you guys will look with me in your book on page 100. And we're talking about the attorney's responsibility. The first in practice on page 100 is straight from our standard offer to purchase and contract. Now we're going to look at our offer to purchase and contract in unit 10, but we got a little excerpt, the first in practice on page 100. I want you guys just to take a minute and read that. Just read it real quick. I'm not going to quiz you on it, but just take a minute and read it really quick, because there's something I want to share with you guys. Again, this is straight from our standard offer to purchase and contract. The offer to purchase and contract is the legally binding document between the buyer and the seller. Sellers shall execute and deliver a general warranty deed for the property in recordable form no later than settlement, which shall convey fee simple, marketable, and assurable title without exception of mechanics liens, free of other liens, encumbrances, or defects, including those that would be revealed by a survey, except this year's taxes, utility easements on violated covenants, et cetera, et cetera. Are there a whole bunch of words in that paragraph that you guys know now that you didn't know 2 weeks ago? Y'all give yourselves a pat on the back. This is what we're doing. Good job, you guys. If I would have told you to read that 2 weeks ago, your hand would have gone up as soon as you hit execute general warranty deed. Right? What's this mean? See, now we don't know all those words yet. We're getting there. But see how much we've covered just in our very short time together. And this is what we're doing, you guys. We're building you up. And you're going to start seeing, if you haven't already, as we start continuing on, going on and on this class, when you guys are out and about in the world, you're going to start seeing things that connect. You're going to start seeing things that relate to what we're doing. And I think just looking at our standard forms is a big part of that. So good job, everybody. Let's see. Y'all want to find your reactions and we can throw confetti at each other? That would be fun. Let's do that. Move your mouse, your Zoom toolbar pops up. If you don't see reactions, then you look under their 3 dots that say more, and then it says reactions. Throw your peers some confetti. They've worked hard. They deserve this. Isn't that fun? Zoom tools. So title insurance protects the current owner from errors of the past. Let's see, we've danced around this idea of title recordation. Again, title recordation is just the act of placing documents in public record. As far as I know, I hate to use the word all because I don't know for sure, but let me say the majority of our counties in North Carolina, if not all of them, allow for e-recording these days. I can't guarantee all because I've not studied all. I do know those of you in the triad counties and our surrounding counties, anything that touches the triad, we e-record now, which means we can do it online. We can look it up online. Once a document is placed in public record, the whole purpose is to give public notice. Let the world know this is your property. You are the owner of record. Look, there you are on public record. Lien priority is given to those that recorded first. Remember what we said about lien priority. Superior liens are paid first. All other liens after that and paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for the mechanic's lien that's recorded in the order in which the work began. So by recording, it helps the attorney know what position to put all those lien holders that are standing there on closing day going, pay me, pay me. It allows the attorney to put them in order, in the order they're in, except for the superior liens and the mechanic liens. Everybody else is in the order in which it's recorded. Another part of the attorney's process is to record the seller's payoff of their deeds. Things have to happen in a particular order. So once the seller pays off their mortgage, the attorney needs to record a lien satisfaction saying that that lien's been satisfied, saying that it's been paid. Once they record the lien satisfaction, that clears the title, and now they can record the buyer's new deed. In other words, they can't record the buyer's new deed until they've done the lien satisfaction for all of the seller's lien holders. It's got to have a date and time stamp, if you will. Seller got a lien, seller paid the lien off, seller conveyed the deed. Things have to happen in a certain order. And part of that linking conveyances, some of that chain that the attorney's looking for is showing that things happened in the proper order. So we briefly introduced you guys to a North Carolina Act last week when we were talking about your deeds and your essential elements and then the non-essential elements that are often there. And this is an important act in North Carolina that we're going to see today. We're going to see it over and over and over again in this class. So here's your official introduction to the North Carolina Connor Act. Connor says that there are certain documents that must be recorded. And Connor spells out what that list of documents are. We'll look at them in just a second. There are certain documents that must be recorded. And the whole point, Connor says, of recording is to protect the current owner against third parties. If you don't have it on record, a third party could show up and try to lay claim to your property. Connor says we record to protect against third parties. Remember, I'm not recording to determine the validity of the document. I think that's where we get, it can be valid even if it's not recorded. Connor says we have to record it to protect against third parties. If you don't put it on public records, how in the world does anybody else know that it's there? So Connor says, put it on public records. Everybody knows that it's there. And you can help be protected from somebody else that could show up and lay claim to your property. Specifically, this is on page 101, if you don't want to rewrite it. Specifically, Connor says we got to record deeds. Connor says we have to record deed of trust. In North Carolina, our deed of trust is our mortgage. Talking about your mortgage and deed of trust in our financing units, units 14 and 15. But when we talk about deed of trust, we're just referring to your mortgage. Connor says leases for more than 3 years have to be recorded. Please note, that says more than 3 years. If your lease is 3 years, you don't have to record it. If it's 3 years and 1 day, Connor says we need to record it. Don't just think about residential leases, you guys. Commercial leases are often 5 years, 10 years, if not longer. Now, I'm not saying you can't have a residential lease more than a year, but I think typically where we see leases more than 3 years is in commercial transactions. Easements have to be recorded to protect against third parties, restrictive covenants. If you're in an HOA, you have covenants. Those are going to be found on public records. Talking more about HOAs in the next unit. Installment land contracts have to be recorded. Options have to be recorded. We're going to talk about both of those in Unit 10. Connor also says that assignments have to be recorded. Again, talking about those in Unit 10. Connor says we have to record. Connor equals record. Please write that down. Connor equals record. Why do we have to record it? To protect you from third parties. When it comes to recording, North Carolina is a pure race state, which means the first one to get to the courthouse and record their document wins. It's a race to the courthouse. There is a fascinating example in your book on page 101, the second example. I'm not really sure where the attorney is in the situation, but this might be another good reason why North Carolina is an attorney state and we hire attorneys. The second example on page 101 says Zackerman sells her property to Sands. Sands doesn't record his deed. 2 weeks later, Shady Zackerman sells the same property to Hanson. Hanson suspects that Zackerman no longer owns the property, but accepts the deed and records it. Who's the first one to get to the courthouse? Hanson. He now has marketable title, and Sands is out of luck. They may be able to hire an attorney and sue Zackerman, but who is the owner of record? Who is the one with the recorded document? We're going to talk about, again, North Carolina is referred to as an attorney closed state. We're going to talk more about that. Guys, here's the deal. Buyers and sellers buy houses and sell houses every day without real estate agents. We are not a requirement in their transaction, but the attorney is. So if they want to go through purchasing a property, they don't have to hire us. That's their choice. But they got to have an attorney to help them with the paperwork, and more importantly, to help with this recordation, to help with the legalities of it, that I'm going to say your average buyer and seller don't know nothing about. If they just go do it on their own without an attorney, do they have something valid that could stand up in a court of law? I would doubt it very seriously. If they're doing it without agents and without attorneys, who's helping them close this thing? Google? I mean, seriously, if they're not using the resources, they got to get it from somewhere. It's not going to work out for them. We are an attorney closed state. We'll talk more about that, what other states may do to close. More to come. Questions? Real quick, kind of a side note, we're a pure race state to record. Other states, and I don't know what states, but other states may use a TORNS system. This is just registering your land. You're registering it in a system, and that's your proof that it's yours. How it works, I don't know. What's the process? Don't know. TORNS system is not what we use in North Carolina. We're a pure race. And it sounds just like that. The first one to get to the courthouse and records wins. It's a race to the courthouse. Yeah, Sydney.
How often does that happen in
Does what-
reality?
Does what happen?
Where they're actually racing to see who can record first?
If there's conflict about proving whose property it is, if you and I are arguing about is it mine or yours, and it's not recorded, yeah, you and I are hopping in our cars and flying downtown, aren't we? So how happened is that actually happen, I can't answer that. It's the ideas, the theory about what kind of state that we are. How fast do you
Gotcha.
like to drive on the interstate, Sydney? Because I can probably drive
Faster
fast.
than I should.
That's what we mean by a race. Y'all get out of Sydney's and I's way as we're driving down I-40 to get to the courthouse, right? We're on a mission.
Thank you.
Of course, it's a fun image too, isn't it? It's a fun visual. It's like rat race. The last little piece in unit 5 is and I hesitate to use the word math because I swear I say math and you guys, but there's numbers involved in the last little piece. So before we talk about the M word, let's just first say what we're talking about. We're talking about something called excise tax. Remember what we said, you guys. They're going to tax you when you buy it. They're going to tax you while you own it. And then they're going to tax you one more time when they go to sell it. And that tax one more time when you go to sell it is referred to as excise tax. Some of us old school people may refer to it as revenue stamps, saying the same thing. Have you guys figured out now real estate's one of those fun industries that we have multiple terms, multiple words that mean the same thing? So if you hear revenue stamps, we're just referring to excise tax. The seller pays the excise tax. They're going to tax you one more time when you go to sell it. Both buyers and sellers have closing costs. We're going to break down those closing costs when we go to closing in unit 21. So excise tax is paid by the seller. Excise tax is always figured on the full purchase price. So whatever the sales price is, sellers pay excise tax off of the purchase price. The calculation, you take the purchase price, which obviously the problem has to give you, and you divide by 500. Your test is not going to give you the 500. So we need to know that excise tax is the purchase price. Here's your formula. Purchase price divided by 500. Here's the key to excise tax. We're never going to have change. Excise tax will always be a whole number. So if you take the purchase price and you divide it by 500 and you get change, then you round up, and always up to the nearest whole dollar. So divide by 500. If you have change, stop and round up. And when I say you always round up, I mean, if you calculate it and you come up with $212.01, you round up to 213. Always round up. Take everything you thought you knew about rounding and throw it out the window for excise tax. This is the government that we're talking about here. Do they want $213 or do they want $212? They want 213. Purchase price divided by 500 and round up. Here's a couple examples. We're told the problem tells us that we have a sales price, a purchase price of $249,750. Why don't you guys tell me in a chat what this seller's excise tax is going to be? Divided by 500 and then round up. Looks like we've mastered excise tax. So we took our sales price of $249,750, divided it by 500, $499.50. Do I have change? Yep. So now what do we need to do? Round up, always up to the nearest whole dollar. So what's this seller going to pay for excise tax at closing? What's their closing cost going to be? $500. To me, there's two pieces to getting excise tax. Remember the divided by 500. And then always remember to round up. All change goes up. Questions on excise tax? See why I hesitate to call that math? We'll see this again in Unit 21. And I'll ask you guys who pays excise tax. I want every single one of you to tell me the seller. And that gets us through Unit 5. Those key terms are back on page 85. Key point review starts on page 103. Student quiz on page 106. I think, yep, you even got some excise tax math. Your student quiz at the end of Unit 6. And then the concepts for better understanding excise tax, you can find that in your book on page 102. Questions on Unit 5? I tend to call Unit 5 the attorney's unit. You want to know why? In the real world, when you're working with buyers and sellers, when issues come up with the title, what are you going to do? Call their attorney. At no point are we ever to whip out our pre-licensing book and explain what title insurance means. Again, you guys, a big part of this class is teaching us to stay in our lane. Let the attorney do their job. That's why they get paid the big bucks. Fair enough? All right, let's take 10. We come back, we're getting into Unit 6. We keep going. we for the last hour? We good? Everybody hanging in there with me? Good, good, good. I tell you, when I say we keep going in this class, I wasn't joking. We just keep going. So we're going to get started on Unit 6 today. We won't get through all of Unit 6. So we'll pick up where we leave off on Thursday. And before we leave today, we're going to talk about what Thursday is going to look like so you guys can get prepared. So you're back, cameras are on, and I can see you. Welcome back. So before we get into Unit 6, let's talk about what we're getting into here. It's of my opinion that Unit 6 is the first real unit that brings the real estate agent in. So we're going to talk in this unit, start introducing you to the things that are our responsibility, the things that the broker needs to be paying attention to, that the broker needs to be doing as part of their job. So this is kind of an exciting unit for me, because you guys have been here for 2 weeks wondering what the heck you're going to do as a real estate agent. And Unit 6 is really our first opportunity to say, here you go. This is what we're going to do. Before we get into Unit 6, though, I just want to get you guys thinking about some things. I mean, obviously, it's too soon to start, talking to firms and who you want to affiliate with your real estate career and all that good stuff. We'll get there. Just bear with me. But one thing I want to get you guys thinking about as we get into Unit 6, as real estate agents, we are the experts of our market. And what I mean by that is the area that you want to work. Let's talk about this for a second. Once you get your real estate license, your North Carolina real estate license gives you the golden ticket to assist in any transaction for sale or for lease anywhere in the entire state of North Carolina, as long as the property is located in North Carolina. If the address of the property is North Carolina and you're involved in this transaction, your real estate license says you can do it. That's what we mean by being a North Carolina real estate broker. The reality is, it's hard to take on the entire state, isn't it? So just because we do have a golden ticket to work anywhere in the state of North Carolina that we can, we're also expected to be experts of our market. And because of that, a lot of us, most of us, choose to work in a certain area. For example, my Winston-Salem people, you may choose just to work within the city limits. You may choose to work only Forsyth County. You may choose to work the triad. Do you guys hear this common word I'm using? Choose, choose, choose. If you want to work the triad, you're dealing with multiple cities, you're dealing with multiple counties, and you need to be familiar with those cities and counties. Is everybody with me? Being the expert of your market. So a big part of what we do, we're current on trends. We watch the news, we pick up a newspaper, we know what's going on around us. We study the numbers, new listings that go under contract. We use a common system called the multiple listing services. Some of you may heard it referred to as the MLS. We're going to introduce you to the MLS in Unit 8. But by going in MLS, you can keep track of what was listed today, what went under contract today, what closed today. And you start noticing these trends. And buyers and sellers are relying on you to not only know these trends, but to be the expert. When they have questions about land use controls, for example, we can be the source for them to find more information. So I encourage you just to kind of start thinking about the areas that you want to work, your specialty. Are you doing residential, commercial, property management? Your license gives you the ticket to do that. What I need you guys to do is hone in. Just because you can work the entire state of North Carolina doesn't necessarily mean that you should. If I have a friend that wants to buy a house in Wilmington, I live in Archdale. If you don't know Archdale, it's like south of High Point. If you didn't know High Point had a suburb, you just did. So I live in Archdale. Let's say I have a friend that wants to buy a house in Wilmington. I've been to Wilmington once or twice. It's a lovely city, except for 5 o'clock on a Friday when you get stuck on traffic and in the summertime, and I was a little frustrated. But I think Wilmington's nice. I've been there a couple times. I don't follow the local news. I know nothing about the schools, the roads, the zoning, anything like that. Would I be doing my friend a service by helping her myself buy a house in Wilmington? Would I be doing my friend a service? No. What's the best thing I could do for my friend? Refer her to an agent in Wilmington. Can I collect a referral fee? Shoot, yeah. I sent her down there. I gave the business. How much referral fee am I going to get? We will talk about that. But my point is we need to know when it gets out of our realm. We need to know when it gets out of our area of experience, our expertise. And you're going to start hearing me say this, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Remember right before break, Sydney and I were rushing to the courthouse, and we were flying down the interstate to get to the courthouse first. Let's go back to that interstate. How many of you get, let's say you get on 40 this afternoon and the speed limit says 65. If the speed limit says 65, how fast are you guys actually going? Come on now. 90? I hear you. Can you go faster than the posted speed limit? Can you? Well, heck yeah, you just push that gas pedal a little bit harder and away you go. Should you? Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And that's what we need to do, is learn our parameters, learn what the can is. Can I violate license law and commission rule all day long? Does that make it okay? Should I? And that's what we're helping to do, you guys do, is teach you the speed limit, teach you the parameters. What are you going to say? You're doing 90 and the cop pulls you over and you say, but officer, my car is capable of going faster than 65 miles per hour. Is the cop going to say, okay, have a nice day? Probably not. That's where we're here, you guys. And that's why we need you to be the experts of your market, to be familiar not only with the market, but the laws and the rules, which we're covering, introducing you guys to. So I would just start thinking about your parameters, where you want to work, what scope you want to work, understanding right now that it's not recommended that we take on the entire state. If you do take on the entire state, you need to learn the whole state. Do I have everybody? How many of you, for fun, go open housing on Sunday? Anybody go open housing? A few of you? I think as you guys are learning your market, when you see a house for sale in your area, when you go to your favorite website like Zillow or Realtor.com or wherever you like to go to search properties, if you see an open house on Sunday, go. That's a great opportunity for you to get in the front door and start seeing what homes in your market that you're going to work look like. Do me a favor. Do not go into this open house acting like a super serious buyer, right? Unless you are. Do not do that to the agent that's holding the house open. Be honest, walk in the front door and say, I'm in pre-licensing and I just wanted to come see what the inside looks like. You guys are driving around, you see a house with a for sale sign on it, safely pull over, look it up, and see what the asking price is for. See what how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms. You guys can start looking at these things now, not taken away from your study time, but you guys can start looking at and thinking about these things now. So you're positioning yourself to be the experts of the market that you choose to work. Remember, you guys, your goals. Don't put your cart in front of your horse. I know you want to go out and help lots of buyers and sellers. I know you want to go out and look at a lot of pretty houses. Before you do that, though, you got to get your license. To get your license, you got to pass these 2 tests. So that's why I say, don't let open housing take away from your study time. But if you're out and about next Sunday afternoon and you see an open house sign, or if you see a sign for sale, look it up. It'll give you an idea of what homes are in or around your market. So with all that being said, Unit 6 is our land use controls. And again, we're going to start bringing in the roles, the positions of us. We're actually going to start talking about what it is that we're doing starting today through the rest of this class. So our guide, our roadmap for Unit 6, we're going to identify we have public land use controls and we have private land use controls. So we're going to identify both of those. We're going to talk about zoning in Unit 6, and we're going to talk about some zoning vocabulary, having a basic understanding of related zoning terms. We're going to talk about our responsibility when it comes to disclosing land use, helping our buyers and sellers get to that information so they can make an informed decision. Always remember, I'm a fact finder. I help my buyers and sellers gather the facts so they can make an informed decision. And that's a big part with these land use controls. So up first, starting on page 110, we talk about public land use controls. Public land use controls are regulated by and created by the government. And violations of public land use controls will involve law enforcement. An example of a public land use control that we're getting ready to meet is zoning. Violation of zoning, it's a governmental right. And if your neighbor is violating zoning, call the cops, call law enforcement. What's going to happen when you call the cops? I don't know. But that's where it starts. We got to notify the law enforcement. We got to notify the law that there's a violation of a public land use control. The government controls, government regulations on how we can use our land, regulated by law enforcement. Each city or county or a municipality has what's referred to as a master plan. Were you guys ever asked in high school or college, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Anybody else ever hate that question? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing for lunch yet today, not alone where am I going to be in 5 years. The master plan answers that question. The master plan says, where do we see ourselves as a city in 20 years? And what can we do to work towards that master plan? What can we do to make sure that our master plan, our long-term plan, happens? Growth does not happen overnight. Growth takes planning. And the master plan helps the city or the county work towards that long-term goal. And one way that they can achieve and work the master plan is by issuing zoning. Zoning is different. Zoning varies from city to city, county to county. Zoning is imposed by the local government. Even if you own your property, fee simple absolute, you have the highest form of ownership, there are still zoning regulations in place that tell you what you can and cannot do with your land. So even in the highest form of ownership, there are still zoning regulations in place. I'm looking at several ceilings and walls, and you know, guys, we're so early. We're not going to keep doing this every class. I can't give you credit if I can't see you. So I'm getting ready to take attendance again. Well, that explains that. I still don't see the same people I didn't see before. So I guess we're not here. I don't know what else that means. Okay. So zoning, there's laws imposed by local government, and it regulates. It tells you, yes, you own your property, fee simple absolute, but there's regulations, there are controls, and all these things zoning relate to that city or that county's master plan. How you use your land affects their long-term goals, their long-term projections. Zoning cannot violate the rights of property owners. There's a provision in our amendments, constitutional amendments, says zoning can't violate the rights. They can control, but they can't violate. And zoning has to be flexible. Things change, things happen, companies come and go. People come and go. People got to go where the jobs are, right? So if our master plan is to bring in 100,000 people into this city, the next question needs to be, well, what do we do to get these people here? Don't we need to create jobs? How do you create jobs? You install Amazon manufacturing plant. Everybody with me? All of that is in the master plan. Yeah, I'm sorry, Erica. I'm so sorry. I didn't see your hand. Yes, ma'am.
No, you're fine. I just did it. You did see it. I have a question. Can you give me an example of zoning must not violate the rights of a property owner?
We're getting there. Yep.
Okay. I was
We're gonna
sure I didn't.
Yep.
Okay.
We're going to talk about different types of zoning and what those regulations look like. So in other words, they can say you do whatever you want to with your land, but they can't affect your legal bundle of rights, right? As the owner, you're entitled to those legal bundle of rights. Zoning's got to be flexible. As things change, zoning has to change to be adaptive to that. Look with me, if you will, in your book on page 112. There's an example on page 112. In many large cities, factories and warehouses sit empty. Some cities have begun changing the zoning for such properties to prevent new residential commercial developments. Throw in some tax incentives, changes lure developers back into the cities. The result is modern housing, conveniently located, affordable, all because we changed the zoning. Isn't this happening in downtown Winston-Salem right now as we speak? Isn't this happening in downtown High Point right now as we speak? Winston's taken those old RJR warehouses and they're creating some nice living space. If you ever get an opportunity to tour one of those condos downtown, they're nice. It's hard to believe that they used to manufacture tobacco there, right? But they've rezoned and that draws businesses in. Does anybody know Winston-Salem 20 years ago? Anybody remember? I've been around. It's a big difference, isn't it? The mayor of Winston-Salem was once quoted as saying that 20 years ago, you could fire a cannon down 4th Street after 5 o'clock and not hit a soul. Today, not the case. You got to be careful you don't hit somebody with your car on 4th Street in downtown Winston-Salem. They allowed housing, affordable housing downtown. They rezoned, they revitalized their town because zoning is flexible. We have something called the North Carolina Enabling Act. This is the act that says zoning is local. Winston-Salem's government dictates and regulates Winston-Salem zoning. Raleigh is not going to show up to Winston-Salem and say, this is what your zoning needs to be. Raleigh handles Raleigh's zoning. Winston does Winston, Charlotte does Charlotte. Zoning is local in nature. So back to my original question, if you guys want to take on the entire state of North Carolina, are you familiar with all of our cities and all of our counties zoning? Are you willing to learn all those zonings? You guys see what I'm saying? They're all different. So when you learn one city, all you know is that city. We need to be able to find the resources to help our buyers and sellers get that information so they can make that informed decision. So Enabling Act says zoning is local. There are no nationwide or statewide ordinances. It's local in nature. Just some general classifications. Residential is meant for dwelling, meant for habitat. Commercial is retail, sale, for example, office park. Industrial are warehouses, agriculturals are farms. These are the big classifications. Usually within the general classifications, we have sub classifications. So maybe it's not just residential zoning. Maybe it's residential single family. If it's zoned single family, how many families can live on that property? Single family, how many properties can live on? Yeah, just one. If it's zoned multifamily, how many families can live on that property? 2 or more. Everybody with me? That subclassification says, yes, you can live here, but we need to know who. Same thing with commercial. It could be zoned retail, which means unless you're a store selling stuff, you can't be here. So that's what we mean by subclassifications. We also have areas that are multi-zoned. It could be zoned residential and commercial. Back to any downtown area. Stores on the first floor, apartments on the second floor up. Anybody familiar? Know what I speak of? You could live on the third floor over the city market. That would be a multi-zoning. It's zoned for 2 purposes. Commercial on the first floor, residential on all the floors up. So starting on page 112, we're going to go over some zoning classifications, some zoning terminology. Maybe you come across this, maybe you don't. This is going to help answer the question, what's that right to violate? And would they violate the owner's rights as well? Because depending on what kind of zoning you're in, that may impact how you can use the property. So some zoning terminology. I do recommend after class putting this zoning terminology on flashcards. I think if you see a question in your test on zoning, it's going to give you a scenario, and then it's going to ask you what type of zoning applies, A, B, C, or D. So I think we need to have a basic understanding of the different zoning terms, the different zoning words. So the first one we have is called a cluster zone. And where we see a cluster zone is with our cul-de-sacs. By slightly reducing, most of the time homes in a cul-de-sac may not be always perfect squares or rectangles. They may be smaller at the front, kind of open up in the back. But reducing those sizes, we increase that open space. We can get a lot more homes around a cul-de-sac by offering that cluster zoning. So cluster zoning, again, the best example is a cul-de-sac. We're just adjusting the lot sizes to get more, the developer to get more in. Another zoning term is referred to as a buffer zone. This is some kind of strip of land that's meant to separate 2 different zoning classes. Usually what we're trying to do is separate residential from non-residential. Maybe on the other side there, it's an industry and industrial. Maybe it's like some kind of retail, like that could be a Walmart or something. But do you guys see this red box right here? Can you guys see this? Right here. You guys see that? That's some kind of buffer zone. That area of trees right there is a protected area because it's a buffer zone. It's helped to separate between the residential and the non-residential. Again, those trees are protected, which means if you just decide you're going to go chop them down anyway, you could face fines. You could face penalties. The government regulation is protecting that area, that buffer zone. I cannot, Christy. Another zoning term we have is extraterritorial jurisdictions, also known as ETJs. ETJs regulate areas outside of the city limits, but not within the city limits. ETJs generally don't have the population to have the government to have their own zoning. So they piggyback off of the cities. If the city puts them in their city limits, then they've annexed them. And now they're part of those city limits. So ETJs, again, it comes down to population. Do the numbers support their own government function? If not, then they can piggyback. They're not within the city limits, but they got to follow that city zoning. If they become in the city limits and they've been annexed, the city has incorporated them, they've adopted them. Another zoning term is non-conforming use. And before you guys start writing down every single word. Non-conforming use, non-conforming means you're using the property in a way different than zoning. You're not conforming with the current zoning. We got two types of non-conforming use. There's legal and there's illegal. They're both non-conforming. One's okay, one's not. In order to determine if it's legal or not, I need you guys on your scratch paper. I'm such a fan of drawing pictures. But you're reading this question, you're trying to determine if it's conforming or non-conforming, I'm sorry, legal or non-legal. And the first thing you need to ask yourself is, which came first, the rule or the use? And this timeline that we're drawing helps us see that. So you read the problem, you see that the use is in place, and then they change the rule. That is a legal non-conforming use. They're not going to make you shut down because they change the rule. You're going to be grandfathered in. You're going to be allowed to use the property in this legal non-conforming way until either you go to sell it or you request permits for major updates. We will talk about permits. We'll see that on Thursday. Let's say, for example, has anybody ever been in an older residential area, and there's this random gas station that looks like it's been there since the 50s, and it doesn't really look like it fits? My gut tells me that's a legal non-conforming use. It used to be zoned for commercial. They changed the zoning to residential, but guess what? They're not going to make that gas station attendant shut their doors. They're going to allow them to keep operating because they were there first. Now, if that gas station owner goes to sell the gas station, the new owner probably won't be able to use it as a gas station. If that gas station owner decides they need to do major updates, they probably won't get approval from the city. They probably won't get those permits to do those updates. Why? Because it's a non-conforming use. It doesn't go with the current code. So they'll let you doing what you keep doing. The other one is the illegal non-conforming use. In this case, the rule was in place. You knew the rule. You knew darn well what the rule was. And you chose to use it in a way that is non-conforming. Question comes in, if the owner gives it to an heir, are they still good? Again, I don't know the answer to that, but my gut tells you that that deed has to change hands, right? It's still got to change hand. And I think that's what we're looking for here. Call your attorney. They can tell you for sure. But I think when that deed, even if your heir is taking it, that deed is still changing hands. Let's say you move into an area and it's zoned residential only. Residential only means what? We can only live there, right? And you decide, you wake up one day, because you watch a show probably on HGTV or something, and you wake up one day and you decide you want to convert your garage into a hair salon. Is that hair salon a non-conforming use? Is that hair salon residential? No. You don't check the zoning. You don't do any research. You just break out your wood and hammer and start converting your garage to a hair salon. Guess what? Because that's a commercial use in a residential property, you have an illegal non-conforming use. The rule was there and you chose to use it in a different way. Please understand, I think the problem topic with this is, one's conforming and one's not. No, they're both non-conforming. What we need to say is one is okay and one is not. This takes us back to Unit 4. Just because you see your neighbor doing it, just because you see your neighbor running the gas station, does that automatically mean that you can open up a gas station in your lot too? You need to check the zoning. Airbnb, man, those get tricky, but absolutely, because it's still residential, but now it's for pay, right? In exchange for pay. Airbnb's messed up a lot of things. One, they happen so fast. But two, have you guys ever heard the expression that technology, for example, things move faster than the law? And I think in some cases, the law is still trying to come up with a lot of how Airbnbs are regulated. But some local zonings can say Airbnbs are okay because somebody's living there. Somebody else may say they're not because it's commercial, because you're renting it out. Non-conforming use. Legal because the use was in place before the rule. Illegal because the rule was in place before the use. Questions on this? Home office on your property again. Do you have the public over? Are you open for business? Do you put a sign out on your front door telling people to come by and see you? I mean,
I have a question.
can you see? Sure, but let me finish, please. Can you see
Sure.
how a lot of these things can depend? It could depend on how your business is operated from your home and what your local zoning says about it. Yes, ma'am.
So to find out if the rule was in place first, you would need to just go back into like the public search of like the zoning records.
Well, the zoning, so each city or county has their own zoning page,
Correct.
right? So so we'll be able to go look up, what the rule is. Yeah.
And when it was
kind of- yep,
established. Okay, I get it. Okay, just making sure I was.
Sure. Okay, so non-conforming use. Another zoning term is something called a variance. A variance is asking permission to break the rules. This is important. Y'all write this down. A variance is one and only one property owner. One property owner is going to the zoning board and they're asking permission to break the rules. And it's not just because they wanna, it's because the government zoning affects how they can use their property. It somehow negatively impacts them. And they're dealing with a hardship. I can't use my property because of your zoning. So that one property owner goes to the zoning board, they go to the zoning meeting, they explain their hardship. They explain why your zoning won't let me use my property. And then they ask the zoning board, can I have your permission to break the rules? Will you grant me a variance that will allow me to use my property different than anybody else? Let's say, for example, we have a property and here's the road. And let's say one zoning restriction in this area is that there's a setback requirement. And what we mean by a setback requirement is they may prohibit you from building anything, I don't know, 15 feet close to the road. They may say any structure you put in has to be at least 15 feet away from the road. Why might they do that? So when they come in and widen the road or put in sidewalks, take your property from eminent domain, you don't have a house there, right? So they may have a setback restriction. So they have this setback restriction. And let's say in the very back of the lot, if you were to build, I don't know, let's just say the setback restriction puts the house here. So this is where we can build. And in the very back part of the land, the very back part of the lot is a creek. that runs in the back part of the lot. You gonna try to build your house on a creek? Probably not. Gets a little complicated, doesn't it? So this one homeowner may be able to go to the zoning board and request permission to build their home closer to the road, so they're not building over a creek. They've received permission, they've received a variance to break the rules, in this case, of that setback requirement, of that setback restriction. The keys to understanding a variance. Everybody show me, how many property owners are involved? Everybody show me, how many? Just one property. You don't have a whole community going to the zoning board and saying, we want this. You have one property owner, and they have to be able to prove a hardship. They have to be able to prove that this land is unusable per your zoning ordinances. If they're granted that variance, then they're granted permission to break the rules. And once again, I ask you, can you look at what your neighbor's doing and see that it's okay for you to do too? You don't know that that neighbor hasn't received a variance. Another zoning term is a special use permit. This is also referred to as a conditional use permit. Now we got multiple owners, maybe one, maybe several. But we want permission to use the property in a different way, usually different from residential, because it benefits the public interest. Has anybody ever seen an elementary school smack dab in the middle of a neighborhood? Has anybody ever seen a church or a library or a hospital? That's probably going to be a special use permit. The zoning board has granted permission to use the property, just that one property, in a way that benefits the public interest. Schools are not residential, but schools may be there because of a special use permit. Rock quarry, there you go. Again, it's still permission to use property in a different way, but now it's just not one homeowner, it's everybody deciding, golly, it would really benefit this neighborhood if we had an elementary school here. Zoning board agrees. Here we are, special use permit. Another zoning term is a zoning amendment. An amendment is a change. So if you're going in front of the zoning board and you're requesting an amendment, what are you requesting? A change to the zoning. Have you guys ever driven around and seen zoning signs? They're usually white signs with red Z's or red signs with white Z's. What those signs are doing is alerting you to an upcoming public meeting. Somebody has launched the discussion to allow, for example, commercial, to allow this land to now be used as commercial. If the zoning board approves it, they have amended the zoning ordinances. They changed it. We're going to see this word amendment, again when we talk about contract law. And I'm going to ask you guys, what does it mean to amend something? And all of you are going to tell me it's a change. This has nothing to do specific with zoning. The word amendment means a change. Zoning amendments, again, we got to be approved by the zoning body, governing body. And when that change is made, now we can have the large shopping center come in that all those homeowners in that area was fighting. That's usually what happens. My High Point people, you guys remember last year they wanted a Publix on Johnson and Skeet Club. Y'all remember that? They wanted to tear down that historic house. Boy, people uproared. They went after it. That thing has been put off to the side for now. I bet you Publix will be back. If they want to build there, they'll be back. So zoning amendment, requesting change to the official document, or to the official zoning. Another zoning term, we may have an overlay district. With an overlay district, you have two zonings. One's kind of superimposed over the other. The best example of an overlay district, or an example of an overlay district, might be an area that's zoned residential and historic. We'll talk about historic next. But those people that live in historic districts got to follow the rules of both zonings, residential and historic. When I think of overlay districts, I always think of this contraction down here at the bottom right. Does anybody remember these things? If you don't, please don't tell me, because it just makes me feel old. So these were like projectors before we had projectors, right? And your teacher or whomever used these things would put their transparency on this flat surface right here. And then they turn this thing on, and this light that was brighter than the sun would project out and shine the light image onto the wall so we could all see it. Did you guys ever have kooky teachers that put two transparencies on top of each other? Whoa, that would be our overlay district. We have one type of zoning and we come in and we lay another one down on top of it. Speaking of historic zoning, here's our historic preservation zoning. The whole idea, question comes in, you can conform to one or the other or both. No, in an overlay, you got to follow both rules. In an overlay, you got to follow both zonings. Historic preservation zoning, the whole idea of historic preservation zoning is to keep the exterior looking historic. Again, I go back to Winston-Salem. If you're not familiar with Winston, then let's go up to Williamsburg, Virginia. Historic preservation zoning, we need to keep Old Salem looking like Old Salem, don't we? We need to keep the outside. Did you know people live in Old Salem? All those houses you walk by in Old Salem and in Williamsburg, people actually live there. And when they buy homes there, they know that they cannot do anything to the exterior without having approval from the historic zoning board. Now, the inside is a totally different story. If you ever get the opportunity to show homes in Old Salem or wherever, you have a historic district in Asheville too, I promise you. Every place I know has some kind of historic district. They have no regulations over the inside. Their regulations are outside. You know, if the area was built in the 1800s, then you can't allow vinyl siding. Do we have vinyl siding in the 1800s? Do we have pink exterior in the 1800s? That's what we mean. We got to keep Old Salem looking like Old Salem, for example. So here's an example of what we might see in a historic zoning. No exterior portion of historic properties can be erected, altered, restored, moved, or demolished until after certificate of appropriateness has been submitted to and approved by the Historic District Commission. So you live in a historic district, you know that, you knew that when you bought it. You want to change something to the outside, you got to go to the historic zoning board and get permission to make those changes to the outside. Another zoning term is aesthetic zoning. This is to help keep things pretty. Somebody just said you were from Asheville. You know, Biltmore Village. Biltmore Village is a great example of aesthetic zoning. Don't you feel like you're in a snow globe when you're in Biltmore Village? You feel like you're in Christmas land, right? That's designed that way for a reason. Even our McDonald's doesn't look like McDonald's in Biltmore Village. That's aesthetic zoning. It's zoned a way to keep it looking a certain way. You may have different, they may say any commercial property that's gonna build on Main Street can only build with brick. For example, they may have sign height requirements. They may not want signs over a certain amount of height, so they don't block our big, beautiful blue sky. Homes in aesthetic zoning, again, are zoned for appearance. We want to keep things looking pretty, keep things looking a certain way. Possibly waterfront property high, like how high you could go off the water, possibly could be an aesthetic zoning. Maybe a setback, could be. They may say, not a setback, but they may say all homes can't be over 1.5 stories or 2 stories or whatever. See what we mean by your regulations on zonings? You own this property, fee simple absolute, but we still have to follow the rules of the zoning. You can't just go do what you want to do. We got to make sure we're always in compliance with the city's master plans, and that's why they establish the different types of zonings. Spot zoning is another one. One or more properties rezoned to permit a different use. I think a good example of spot zoning would be a park in a neighborhood. Question comes in about HOA. We're going to talk about that with our private land use control. So we will actually compare private and public at the end of Unit 6 on Thursday. Again, an example, if you see like a random park in a neighborhood, that very well might be a spot zoning. Spot zonings are only legal if they're in the public's best interest. Spot zonings are not going to benefit the individual property owner. Spot zonings are for the public's best interest. Again, you guys, we just went over a lot of zoning terms. I'm aware of that. Keep it simple, keep it basic. And I do recommend flashcards. So we have that basic understanding. Like I said, if you see a test question, it's going to give you a scenario. It's going to know the best zoning for that property. Do I have any questions? So when it comes to zoning, what does this mean for us? Remember I said this is the first unit that's bringing the broker into play. So when it comes to zoning, we're starting this idea that we have this duty to disclose things. And zoning is one of those things that we have to disclose. The listing agent needs to disclose what type of zoning the property is currently in. They can do so using the multiple listing services. The buyer's agent, for the most part, should be able to rely on what the listing agent disclosed. But if there's any questions or if there's any particular need, now the buyer's agent has a duty to help the buyer verify that zoning. Let's say, for example, you're helping a buyer buy. And they look at you and say, at some point in the near future, I would like to convert my garage into a hair salon. What do you think? Do you, as their agent, now have a duty to help them make sure that they could, somewhere in the future, convert that garage into a hair salon? Do we now have a duty to help them disclose, help them discover that that zoning You better believe we do. That's why they hired me, is to help them gather the facts, to help them get the information. Now, if the buyer never shares that with me, if they don't discuss that with me, what can I do about it? I'm not a mind reader. Are you guys mind readers? You know, so if they ask a whole bunch of questions and they never share it with me, I can't help them. But once they share it with me, I can help them discover that zoning. Whether or not you're rural or urban, when it comes to zoning, basically urban is just referring to in town, downtown. Rural is going to be outside of town. So having, again, this goes back to knowledge of your market. There's different zoning typically downtown than what we have in more rural areas. We are the experts of our market. So as we said, sellers agents, we always have to check zoning before we advertise the property. It's a required field in the MLS, meaning I can't submit the property until I verify the zoning, and I'm going to look it up. I'm going to do some research. I'm just going to put something in there or put in there what I think. When you join your firms, you're going to be given checklists. Checklists help you know the various things to look up, the various things to verify before you list a property. Like we said, buyer's agents, for the most part, we should be able to rely on what is in MLS, what we're told to by the listing agent. But if we have any reason to doubt it, now we have a duty to look it up. If my buyer shares something of a specific or relevant importance to them, now I have a duty to make sure that their end use can be met. Do not tell a buyer that they can convert a garage into a hair salon because somebody down the street has. You tell the buyer, gee, that's a great dream. Let me look it up and help make sure that your end use you can do with the property that you want to do. I had a great question come in. Where would a flood zone fall? A flood zone, also known as a flood hazard, is just alerting us to areas that are prone to flooding. We got a whole unit dedicated to insurance. So when we get to unit 13, we're going to talk about insurance, particularly flood insurance, and what that means for the consumer. Questions? We're going to end here today. And before you guys go, remember, I'm going to let you guys stay on the call so you can form your study groups. But before we officially end, what's Thursday going to look like? So Thursday, we're going to finish unit 6. If you haven't looked ahead, please look ahead at unit 6. After 6, we're going to do unit 20. You start skipping around a little bit. So to get ready for Thursday, look at unit 6, look at unit 20. After 20, we're going to give you guys a brief introduction or a little introduction to unit 7. I need everybody to listen to what I'm about to tell you. Units 7, 8, 9, and 10 are heavily tested units. 7, 8, 9, and 10. 7 and 8 are all about agency, forming that relationship, the duties that we owe as agents. 9 and 10 is dealing with contracts. It's to my belief, when you guys signed up for this class, you thought you were signing up to learn about agency and contracts. And we're finally going to get there. We're going to introduce it to you guys. Next week is going to be all about agency. I need you guys to look ahead. I need you guys to read unit 7. I'm telling you right now, heavily tested units. We've been warming up. Thursday, we're there. Everybody have that written down real big? 7, 8, 9, and 10. Guys, the next couple weeks are going to get deep. So please, 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 please look ahead so we can be prepared. we've blown through what, 6 units in about 2 weeks, something like that. It's gonna take us over 2 weeks to get through those 4 units. So that tells you something about the density. That tells you something about how much time we're spending in these topics. You've been warned. Okay, I'm available for questions. You guys don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you want to stick around to exchange numbers for a study group, I'm going to stop recording now so you guys don't have to worry